welcome everyone to episode 207 of Look Out Sir, a Warhammer podcast made by me, Dan, but also Phil. How you doing, mate?
The not Joe person.
The not Joe person. Why are you saying it like that, mate? It sounds like you're bitter about something.
I just, I just miss Joe.
Oh, is that what it is? Did you rather I would go away and Joe take my place?
No, I think you would rather I went away and I was Joe.
I think that you think I would go away and be replaced by Jordan Sorcery.
Well, that is true. I mean, he's a great chap.
Mate, you two would be absolutely awful in a podcast together.
Our beards would be intertwined together.
Absolutely, because of all the kissing.
Exactly, yes. We would just be talking about old Warhammer fantasy, all the good old days.
Much in the same way, though, Phil, I would say this as well. If me and Joe were doing a podcast without you in it, it wouldn't work, right? Like, me and him together is just not useful.
Right. You just wouldn't talk about 40k at all. It would just be a back history of your lives and your childhoods. It's basically how you two trauma dump on each other.
That is essentially it, yeah, absolutely.
That would be every episode.
It's always the thing that when we do Liam Dempsey live streams together, which isn't super frequent, I've done it like 3 times now, but if you ever go back and watch those and you see what it's like to see me and Joe just together, it's just far too much talking about nothing in particular, and it's absolutely insane. So yeah, no, I'm glad he left Phil and you remained. I don't think it would have worked any other way. But yeah, what are we talking about this episode, Phil?
Well, in this episode, we are talking about the 2 hot-ish, new-ish releases, which are Warhammer 40k Chapter Approved, the deck of cards, the elusive deck of cards, the mission deck, and the General's Handbook 2025 to 2026, which is not a mission deck, but a illustrious pack of things to game in Age of Sigmar.
Mate, you did that very well. I could tell that you were running out of track there as you were saying all those words, but you absolutely stuck the landing. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, none of this would be possible without the support of you, our listeners, and obviously thank you to all of you for listening. We are always appreciative. We have a 5-star review segment that you may remember featuring immediately after this intro. We have now pushed those to the end, so effectively if you want to check out the 5-star review, which this week was given to us by Stig on Apple Podcasts of Great Britain, that can be found at the end of the pod. Thanks again, Stig, for your 5-star review. You're an absolute gent. Additionally, obviously, massive thank you to patrons. We can't do this without you, so thank you so much to those of you who take it upon yourself to gift us incrementally small amounts of money that enable us to continue doing the podcast. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, we would love it if you did so. And lastly, there is merchandise via the good people at Rev Level. Great little business run by a fantastic lad up in Blackpool. Definitely worth supporting, even if you don't particularly want to pick up any Lookout Sir merch. Encourage you to go check that out. But if nothing else, please just, chuck us a like, maybe give us a subscribe, or just listen. All of it is lovely and appreciated. But with that all said, we're going to get on with the things that Phil said we were going to talk about. So, yeah, transitional noise. No, just apologise for it and move on with our lives.
Be professional.
No, it's all right. I'm being professional. We're just going to apologise for it, and they'll be fine.
Okay, Dan. Dan's new casual format is lackadaisical. That's for sure.
Is that
would be cool. I think it'd be quite annoying. Unless it gets removed in the echo cancellation. Actually, is that on? Hold on, let me switch.
Well, I might do.
Oh, I don't think mine's switched on. Hold on.
Oh, you got to switch yours on. Oh, talking about my lack of, lackadaisical
I can't.
Or whatever.
Yeah, because I can't change it.
Stop recording, so I will stop. There we go. I've turned it off. Does that make a difference?
Oh yeah, it's much better.
All right, fine. Well, hopefully when I listen to this back, there is a noticeable difference, and I'm not just now suffering unnecessarily. Core blimey, it's warm, Phil, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Very warm indeed.
It is so hot, not least in the actual physical sense, but also in the world of Warhamsters, because we've been having many updates to both core systems, as well as obviously a new edition of Warhammer Horus Heresy coming hot down the pipe but we haven't really paid super amounts of attention to all of the many nuanced rules and interesting things that they're doing there. But the things that we're going to be talking about, at least in the initial instance, is the General's Handbook 2025 to 2026. And of course, Phil, chapter approved Mission Deck 2025 to 26 as well. Now, Phil doesn't have the Mission Deck, but he does have the General's Handbook.
That is correct. I have once again been struck down twice in a row with the curse of Games Workshop stock issue, where I didn't buy it on the Saturday, I forgot. And then it was sold out absolutely everywhere. In fact, I managed to buy a copy from a random independent in Scotland. And then it never turned up. And then I had to send them an email to say, like, where is it? And they said, oh, yeah, sorry, that was a mistake with our website. We listed it as available when it wasn't. We've refunded you the money already. Sorry about that. So, yeah, my local stockist doesn't have it. I'll be in London on Friday, so I'm going to have a little wander around the Element Games, Dark Sphere, Tottenham Court Road Warhammer, and see if I can pick it up from any of those. But if not, I've got to wait literally 2 months.
At least.
To Element Games says, that they expect stock in August. So basically, if I have to wait that long, I basically only get 10 months of the precious 12 months to use the deck, which is ridiculous. But it is what it is.
Exactly. I mean, the way Games Workshop go about stocking these incredibly essential gaming aids, I suppose you can call them, is insane to me. Because the thing is, it's a bunch of cardboard in a box. The profit margin they must be making on these things is maddening. Like, would it kill them, right, to just go, tell you what, we'll make way more than we need. Like, let's just go crazy. Because at the end of the day, like, as an experiment, just throwing it out there, why not just take a punt and print, I don't know, 3 times what you thought you needed and just put it out there and see what happens? Because I don't really understand why it is that, I mean, obviously I understand that in the wondrous world of business, I suppose there is a benefit, theoretically, to selling out of your stock, right? Because ultimately that's a good thing because you've sold your stuff. But it is a bit mad when you create something that is ultimately utterly necessary to play the game and you don't just do loads of them, especially when you consider they're probably manufacturing each one of these units for, like, I mean, let's be really overzealous and say £2 each, right? And they're probably not even that, to be honest with you. So, yeah, like, just go crazy.
I mean, it's a bit mad because they've had, this is, the 3rd one now for this edition of the game. So Correct. They should have a good idea how many they sold of the other 2, and over the course of that entire year that each one was valid for, not just the first run, because normally at least there's, I guess, a second run of stock. They must know that there's that many people willing to buy them, and then just either make the same number or more. And so either one of 2 things have done. They've either understocked, underbought, because they just want to be out of stock and have the shelves free for
which is madness.
Yeah. Which potentially is the case. Has its own issues because obviously, imagine you're a new gamer, you'd be like, cool, I want to come get into Warhammer, I want to buy the stuff, I've got the rule book, okay, Mr. Games Workshop, how do I play the game? And they're like, well, there's all these missions in this mission deck, and they're like, cool, can I buy that? And they're like, no, you've got to wait at least 2 months before it arrives. That sort of is that's not great as a new game experience. If you're someone that is somehow flush with cash and you want to buy everything up front, that's not great. The other option, of course, is that they have genuinely gone, okay, we've made more, but the game is just even more popular, which if you think about, between this deck of cards and the last deck of cards, Space Marine 2 came out. So there's plenty of reasons to explain why that, despite their best efforts, it still might have sold out, which is just deeply unfortunate for me, at least.
Well, look, I don't want to get drawn too hard into the stock issue, but it is an important point when talking about this stuff because It is a madness, and it definitely deserves some level of scrutiny. And I think this is the thing. It's like, not only are there different philosophies that they can adopt, i.e. overstocking it, because at the end of the day, GW is not going to go bankrupt if there are, several copies of this on the shelf. This isn't a particularly expensive endeavor. So, if they sent 3 times the amount of stock out, would it be a problem? I mean, would they... does it turn out that that's actually what they did and that occurred? I doubt it, because I picked up my copy while at Warhammer World. Completely forgot to order it, but tried to order it, but it sold out online. Was at Warhammer World the day it came out. I went straight into the shop, first thing, and picked it off the shelf and bought it. And again, obviously, they do a process of restocking, i.e., once the stuff goes off the shelf, they'll bring more out from the back and put them down there on the shelves. They had many copies of Space Wolves that day. Mm-hmm. But basically, it seemed like, from what I could see, there was maybe 15 copies of this on the shelf at Warhammer World. And once they were gone, they were gone. and that's Warhammer World. So it's like, I can't speak to every individual store, but I know that one of the local stores to me in Staines, I think he got like 2, and it went. And it's like, maybe 3, but they just went. So it's like, ace, good, strong.
And it's not like it's just like the mission cards, right? So, for example, the General's Handbook for Age of Sigmar, they are preset missions, like older editions of 40k. For example, you could take a photo of that mission and send it to me, and I could play Age of Sigmar if I didn't have the General's Handbook, which I do. With the deck format for 40k, is like, you can't really play without it. Now, if I remember rightly, the Tabletop Battles app, I think it's called, has a way of, you can sort of set up your mission through that, and actually you can get it to randomly pre-select it can randomly pick the secondaries for you as if you drew them. So actually you could maybe play it without the deck, but the caveat to that is it doesn't tell you what those secondaries are, so you still need to know what they are, but it at least does the picking mechanic for you. So there's no workaround properly for it, and especially not one that's provided officially by Games Workshop either.
Well, there is actually, because if you're a tournament organizer, Games Workshop have distributed the secondary missions and primary missions and strike force deployment maps. So all of that has been sent out to TOs to accommodate for the fact that they know that there's going to be a stock issue. So they have done things to help kind of mitigate that for tournament play, which, makes a lot of sense. But obviously there's so much more to this than just, the competitive version of the game. And it's just a shame because now that we've kind of, I feel, appropriately addressed that elephant in the room, Games Workshop do better, for God's sakes. I mean, it's insane that you are out of stock in this and will be for months. It's wild. But, all that being said, what this is, chapter approved 25 to 26, feels like one of the best versions of 10th edition Warhammer 40,000 they've crafted. What I love about this is, I mean, first and foremost, it gives me a nice kind of reminiscence of the old open war deck from 9th edition, because it's the same artwork.
I thought it was familiar.
Yeah, so it's the same Crimson Fist artwork, which is obviously a reworking, a Primaris redo of the old classic Road Trader artwork. So, this is a very cool image, and again was used in a really, for me anyway, beloved version of Warhammer 40,000. I felt like 9th edition's open war deck was probably some of the best Warhammer 40,000 has ever been. I know obviously Warhammer 40,000's 9th edition was massively kind of impacted by the ongoing releases of chapter approved and these kind of systems. But all throughout 9th edition, there was the open war deck, and I genuinely consistently attest that to me was one of the best versions or best ways to play 9th edition, bar none. Although again, I also did have a real soft spot for the 2019 chapter approved Maelstrom of War system that was shortly lived, but much loved at its time. But that wasn't 9th edition, that was 8th edition. So blah, 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 blah. The point is it's kind of cool from the outset because it's reminiscent of that packaging. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, so it's a great start from that perspective. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, this facilitates competitive play. But for the first time in it feels like a while, they've made a meaningful effort to try and also support other ways of playing. So we have missions here for Incursion, which is the 1,000-point variant of Warhammer 40,000, which is super cool. So basically, if you're looking to play smaller Incursion games, they have specific maps and setups for that, which is super cool. And again, the thing that's super interesting about it, or at least from the outset on the Incursion setups, is that even though Incursion is the smaller of the point sizes, they've built the missions to the same 60 by 44 map dimensions, which hasn't been the case in the past, right? Like 1,000-point games historically have been recommended to be played on 44 by 30.
Yeah, on the half size, which is a squeeze.
It's a real squeeze. Yeah. I felt like that was incredibly ambitious of them to try and get 1,000-point games onto that size.
Yeah, so interesting it's on the larger table now.
Well, at least that's how it's indicated here, because literally when you look at the different deployment Incursion maps, they all have the same sort of dimensions, basically. So, yeah, the Hammer and Anvil one, which is long ways. So, basically, players set up at the opposite ends of the long board edges. These are using 18-inch deployment zones, and it's quite evident that the variant distance between the two points is 24 based on all the other measurements. So, yeah, it's basically operating in the same DIMS, which is really cool, really cool. Because to me personally, I will make a point of saying this. I kind of feel like Incursion should become the new competitive standard. I think 1,000 points Warhammer 40,000, it's infinitely more interesting than 2,000 point Warhammer 40,000. But then I'm a bit of a contrarian. I will admit.
I mean, I've always enjoyed it, and it's probably what I play more of on a casual setting, at least locally. It's definitely interesting. I mean, I guess technically you would also get more games in, so you can easily work out more, who is the best general in terms of doing different games. I guess also if you could squeeze in 2 games into the same time scale as one normal 2,000 point game, which maybe isn't quite as, just because you're halving.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work like that.
Halving the game. But if you could do some more interesting things like asymmetrical missions where you actually both take turns. So you play the same person twice, basically, with different sort of mission parameters. But maybe that's a bit too almost like chess-like, where you play each other both being like white, for example.
Yeah. Look, I think I don't necessarily hate that idea. I don't think it works in the context of Warhammer 40,000 as it is currently, but I do sort of actually quite like it. But I think realistically, what this would facilitate, because 1,000-point games, the armies feel like you've got to make more kind of clever decisions about what you're prioritizing. I think one of the things with Warhammer 40,000 when played at 2,000 points is it just becomes a very simple game of trading and big high damage stuff that, it's very much. And again, I've said this many times. I'm probably not the most qualified to really speak to what the kind of competitive standard is of Warhammer 40,000 now. But for me, this just seems like a better system. And again, it would be something that I think, would potentially be beneficial, because theoretically you could allocate 2 hours per Incursion game, and should theoretically be able to get through that in 2 hours. I think it would be way too ambitious to tell people to get it done in 90 minutes, an hour and a half. But you can do 2 hours of it and get a break, come back to another 2 hours. Essentially in 2.5 hours, you would have done, not 2.5 hours, sorry, 4.5 hours, you could have done 2 games of Warhammer 40,000 Incursion, and then you have the option where it's like, oh, we could really easily do a third game, or if people were up for it, we could, not too difficultly get in a fourth game. If we were running from like 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening, which is standard most of the time. I mean, Warhammer World, the game, the first game starts at 10 and you're there to wait. So, that's a good, 8 hours, which theoretically you could fit 4 games into if you did them across 2 hours. Now, admittedly, obviously there's breaks and things you have to consider. So maybe it's not quite as straightforward as I'm making out, but maybe you sacrifice a little bit on the breaks because you get a few more of them, right? Because you get more frequent ones. But anyway, it's cool. The incursion missions are cool and essentially follow the same pattern, so they're really nice. Cool to see them playing on the bigger boards. You've got the Strike Force, which is kind of like your standard, air quotation marks, Warhammer 40,000 standard. Again, map layouts all seem really nice, super straightforward, everything you kind of expect from map layouts as it goes. It's got the, really annoying ones where you have to draw points from like the middle of the board to the other end, although they've done away with all the really silly ones where you had to you remember, Phil, there was a time where you had to draw like a line, but there was no like obvious anchor for where it needed to be. It sort of sat out in like no man's land somewhere, whereas at least now they go the middle of the long bit and the top of the short bit.
Yes.
Draw a line between them.
Yeah, it used to be like 12 inches up one end and then 8 inches from the other. It was like really odd measurements, and that was...
Yeah, it was a real faff. Yeah, so, God bless them from that stuff. And then you've also got the asymmetric ones, which are super interesting. Again, really difficult to describe. They're asymmetrical. But they got a lot of really interesting mixtures. I'm going to show Phil because he can see me and you can't. But they got this one here where there's a circle in the middle and 3 additional deployment zones around the kind of corners. So that's super cool. They got this one here where you are deployed smack bang in the middle and they can be deployed above and below you. Sorry, I knocked the microphone there as I was pointing. They got this one here where there's like a spearhead going into...
A wedge, yeah.
A wedge, absolutely. That's kind of cool. They got this one where it's like a weird line going into a box.
Okay, that one's mad.
That one is mad. I'm not so sold on that one, but could be fun to play. And then last, we have the pincer attack, where we have a spearhead going into 2 columns either side. Give him the horns.
Was there not the classic U-shape one?
No, there's no U-shape.
I thought there was.
Classic,
that was.
No horseshoe. No altering symbols here, unfortunately. But I love that because I love the fact that it facilitates interesting ways to play. They got fun little designer notes on it, where they're sort of trying to point out little nuances about how these deployments are intended to work and the kind of ideas that they're trying to express with these. So I think it's super cool. And, and this is just the deployment stuff. I think, genuinely, already it's like, wow, this is great. If I want to play a fun asymmetric game, I've got lots of really cool options. If I want to play a traditional... air quotation marks, Warhammer 40,000 game. We've got my 2,000 point options. And then bizarrely, I'm going to just check here, right? I'm just going to check. So Crucible Battle. Oh, hello. Oh, this is interesting. So hang on. I'm wrong, Phil. I'm flipping wrong.
Is it about table sizes?
This is weird, though, Phil. Because what this indicates is that the table sizes are ever so slightly smaller, but not smaller. What does it say in this book? Hang on. I've made some assumptions. I've got my pamphlet, Phil. My pamphlet. Right. Setting mission parameters, fixed missions, new orders, create a battlefield. Create a battlefield, 7 features, see core rules, missions played regularly. Missions are played on... rectangular battlefields, 44 by 60 inches in size. So they do specify that. That's interesting. Okay. So they've not been specific with the sizes of your incursion. Oh, here we go. Oh, no. No, there's no nuance for the incursion. It is the same. But, okay, fine. So basically, interesting revelation. A crucible of battle, when played in incursion, the topmost objective marker in the top left of the attacker area when played on Incursion, is 16 inches down, 12 inches across, right? And then when played Strike Force, it's 14 inches down, 10 inches across. But as per the diagram, appears in the same place. So there is an ever so slightly... Well, no, actually, according to this, no, that can't be right. What have they done wrong here? According to this, Incursion actually might be bigger.
Is it that you just play more of the... Is it because the table size has shrunk, so therefore deployment zones have also equally shrunk? But look bigger on the...
Well, no, because... Oh, hang on. Oh, no, they are actually different. It's... Okay, all right then. So, I see, I've worked it out. What they're doing is to account for the smaller sizes. It's so slight that you wouldn't notice it without really looking at it. They've pushed the objectives in further to essentially, I guess, catapult the combat into different things. So basically...
So I guess the deployment zones are almost... Are they the same?
Deployment zones are the same. Like they're exactly the same deployment zones. Oh, wait. But that's the other thing, actually. Right, so if you look at tipping point here, right? So if you've got tipping point on Incursion... Oh, I've mucked up these cards already, mate. It's gone to a complete disaster. If you've got tipping point here and here,
right.
When you're playing it on... You can't see this is too blurry. But basically, when you're playing it on Strike Force, they specify the sizes of the deployment zone. They say this bit's 20 inches and this bit's 12 inches. When you play it on Incursion, they don't specify those diameters. They don't specify the space.
So you just meant to make it up? So in the pamphlet, does it say the actual table size?
No, they have not meaningfully addressed what the Incursion table size is.
Or
they
is
have
that
said,
just in the core rules?
It could just be in the core rules.
Maybe.
It could be.
Let's have a quick look on the app and see what it says.
In an Incursion mission, we suggest you following the changes to mustering army rules to better experience both players. Your army can contain up to 2 units with each data sheet name, or up to 4 with battle line. Your army can contain up to 1 Titanic character. No, there's nothing in there, mate. It's just literally... There it is. But again, you wouldn't be able to place the objectives as per their instructions on the smaller boards because essentially they wouldn't fit. Because in the Incursion, they're telling you to position so again, if I'm looking at tipping point, which is a terrible example to have picked, by the way, but we've done it now. We're living with it. Although there we go. So if I'm looking at tipping point for Incursion, one of my objectives has to sit at 14 inches on from the side and 16 inches on from the back, or rather 16 inches on from the side, 14 from the back, asserting that the back and front are the... Oh, wait! No! Oh, God, hang on! I've just noticed, Phil. No, they do use the same deployment zones, but for some absolutely insane reason... When you're looking at the Strike Force card, the dimensions are done with white arrows in the middle of the red space. But when you're looking at the Incursion version, so the Strike Force version, they use white arrows in the red areas.
Right.
And on the Incursion version, they use black arrows on the outside.
Oh, somewhat inconsistent. I was going to say...
That's an absolute madness.
For the mission, Only War, which is your one freebie mission in the core rules,
oh, yes.
It says battlefield sizes... I guess specifically for this one, but we can take this as read for the others. Incursion and Strike Force, both at 44 by 60. And Onslaught, which is the one no one really plays, which is the 3,000 points, 44 by 90.
Well, there are no Onslaught missions in this
Not in this one, which is interesting, because I think sometimes they've, at least in other mission packs, they've given you Onslaught ones.
Yeah, I felt like Leviathan might have done. Sorry, Phil, I'm really going to have to... Sorry, listeners, I'm just going to have to stop for a moment. I've got to go to the toilet. How terrible of me. Be right back. Hey, everyone, we're back. Sorry about that. Nature called. Right, we were talking about minor differences between incursion maps. So it seems like, with the incursion maps, they're pushed in the objectives more, presumably to accommodate the relatively smaller army sizes, to force conflicts into the middle. Seems to be one of their kind of core design principles around modern 40k. At least that's what I assert. That's cool. Happy with that. Any thoughts or feels on that, Phil?
Overall, all good in terms of giving us choice. Love the idea of the sort of, let's say, more narrative missions, even though there's not really any narrative to them. But the fact that you have an attacker and a defender, I believe they also set up like old school, how you like. Attacker sets up first everything, defender then sets up everything to sort of counter that. So that's good to see, and also the fact that there's 1,000-point missions, that is also good.
Yeah, so step 9 of the many steps, step 1 being set mission parameters, muster armies is number 2, determine the mission is number 3, place objective markers, number 4, create the battlefield, number 5, determine attacker defender, number 6, 7, select secondary missions, i.e. are they fixed or tactical, and then number 8, declare battle formations, and then number 9 of, how many steps are there in this entire, number 9 of 15 steps, you deploy your army. Players take it in turns to set up their remaining units one at a time, starting with the defender. A player's models must be set up wholly within their deployment zone. If a player sets up a Titanic unit, then it is their turn. When it is their turn to set up a unit, they skip their next turn to set up a unit if one player finishes deployment. Asymmetric war missions. In an asymmetric war mission, starting with attacker, each player sets up their units wholly within their deployment zone. Once players finish setting up units, is there, if that player has any units that have not been set up, those units start in reserves. So specifically, Phil, that is a asymmetric war stipulation. Oh, did you say that?
I did. So well done
I'm so
for just
sorry.
repeating me. But yeah,
I'm so sorry, mate. I just misheard you.
Good for double checking there.
No, well, because I was excited there for a second. I thought, oh my god, if he's right about this is amazing. I love that.
Not for the normal game. No, you still got
not for the standard air quotation marks. But yeah, cool. Yeah, super cool. And then, as I understand it, if you're playing competitive, again, air quotation marks, you don't use some of the coolest parts of this entire system, and that is the twist deck, Phil. These twists, my boy, my goodness. Like, for me,
are they different from the last lot? Because I think the last edition, they were either completely forgettable to the point where you'd get halfway through the game and then you'd be like, oh yeah, we should have done that thing that probably wouldn't have had much impact, or they were sort of so overly punishing you normally just redrew them.
Phil, let me tell you, these twists, my boy, are quite the thing. So let's start by talking about them. So, twist number 1, Phil, night fight. What do you suppose night fighting is?
Reduce shooting, like range of visibility for the first turn.
No, for the entire game, all units essentially operate with like lone operative, but 18-inch lone op. So essentially, you can only target things that you're within 18 inches of for the whole game.
Okay, remember what I just said. Sometimes they're just too overblown that you'll redraw it.
Well, you say that, though, because what is quite good about this is, and it's a designer note, this is a great twist for players who do not yet have enough terrain to put on the battlefield. And it is true, Phil. The game is quite skewed towards shooting.
That's true. But I imagine if you were a guard player versus a corn player, one person will be rubbing their hands with violent delights, and the other person, the guard player, will be sobbing in a corner going, why did this have to happen to me?
But it's fun, isn't it? It creates a nice, interesting bit of...
It can be, but I think, quite often some people just go, oh, that's just not fair. Oh, I don't want to play it now. Oh, it's too difficult. Whereas if you do have to genuinely embrace these things, I guess, to be like, well, let's give it a go. And especially if you're doing an asymmetrical mission, you might be like, well, I feel like I've got an advantage on my deployment zone, and that sort of balances it out. So,
yeah. Okay. No, I quite like it, though. I mean, so Night Fight, maybe not a slam dunk, but interesting. Ruinscape, Phil. What might that be, you think?
I don't know. Lots of terrain on the table?
No, so each time a unit makes a normal or advanced move, it can move horizontally through terrain features. That's anything, Phil. So all of your tanks could just go through walls now.
And what's the flavour text for this?
Decades of war have reduced the structures on this battlefield to hollow ruins. Your warriors stalk and scramble through the skeletal remains of half-destroyed buildings as they close in upon their enemies.
Okay, I love that. That's a really cool idea. And
you just like it because you can move your tanks through walls.
I can move my tanks through walls, but also the fact that, because I was like, RuneScape, what's that mean? But now you've sold it to me on the story. I like it.
There you go. Maybe it should have been pronounced Ruinscape. My dyslexia does... I was actually quite impressed that I read the whole flavour text without stumbling there. That was quite good.
Well done. Mm.
I'm getting better. I'm learning to weed. Only taken forever. Twist. Martial Pride. What do you think's up with that? I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop asking you to name all these things.
No,
there's so many. I was
going to say it's going to make your leader better in combat.
No, it basically means advancing does not make a battle line unit. So advancing does not make a battlefield unit ineligible to start an action. So you can advance with battle line and do an action, but you can't if you're a vehicle. That's the only stip on that one.
That's cool.
And then also starting an action does not make a battle line unit ineligible to shoot. So your battle line units can both advance and shoot. So if you've got a unit of intercessors with assault weapons, they can advance and shoot and still do an action.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, there's a bunch of them, basically. The one that's gotten people a little bit hot under the collar is Bloodlust. Have you heard about Bloodlust yet?
No. This is all new to me.
Okay, so a unit is eligible to charge if it is within 18 inches of one or more enemy units instead of 12. Each time you make a charge roll 3d6.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's tasty, right?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the one that favours shooting over all these combat-y ones, but
there's
that one's pretty cool. I mean, it's a bit mad.
There's Point Blank, Phil. Point Blank. What do you think Point Blank could be?
You can use blast weapons in combat.
No, you can't, but all of your ranged weapons are pistols. So all your ranged weapons become pistols, which is interesting.
So that basically means no minus... Oh, so you can shoot everything in combat.
Shoot everything in combat, and also the thing is because they're pistols, you can shoot multiple pistols. So if you have a unit of intercessors, you can now go into combat, or just all the time, you can shoot your 25 at rapid fire range bolt rifle shots, plus
and your pistols.
5 bolt pistols.
Okay, I would house rule that to not be a thing because I don't think that was the intended consequences of that. I think it was just meant to be you just shoot your big gun in combat. And here's the thing, I think it's honestly quite rare when an entire unit it also has pistols as well as another gun. Makes Marines very good.
So now your intercessors with that thing can basically run up. Well, they can't advance because their pistols don't have the assault rule. Their bolt rifles do, but they can move up within 12. And now they have 30 shots because of the additional bolt pistols.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, if you get within 12. Lords of War is fun, Phil. Yet again, I'm going to ask you to guess what it is. You're never going to guess it, but you'll be well happy with it.
Lords of War. Well, I'm assuming it's about Titanic units in some fashion.
No, your warlords are paragons of battle, possessed of both peerless skill at arms and relentless thirst a relentless thirst to demonstrate their martial might in the heaviest of fighting. Until the end of the battle, add 3 to the attacks characteristics of each weapon equipped by a Warlord model, excluding vehicles. So you can't put it on your Rogal Dawns, because that would be crazy. You can't put it on your Castellan Knights for, Imperial Knights.
Very crazy, yeah.
But you could put it on, I don't know, a monster or infantry character that happens to be carrying a pretty mad gun. Fugan from...
Oh, wait, sorry.
Elder,
it's not free to your combat attacks?
No, it's all weapons.
Oh,
Every
all
one of your
weapons.
weapons gets additional free attacks.
So
My suspicion is they will FAQ this to include monsters. Because the fact they only includes vehicles at the moment, because you got to think about characters like we received the. Well, mate, I was reading the Thousand Sun book the other day because it obviously came in. Not Mortarion. Magnus has loads of psychic attacks because he's Magnus, right? So all of those would get 3 additional attacks with this.
So it's not just pick one. It's
nope. Every weapon you have.
Okay, I feel like they have, and I don't want to throw criticism at them immediately, but my hot take is they thought of some cool ideas, but then haven't really thought about the consequences of those ideas. So to me, it would be much fairer to be like, at the start of battle, pick one weapon, close combat or shooting, of your Warlord, it gets +3 attacks. And that sort of solves some of the jank, because a lonely commissar with a plasma pistol getting 3 extra attacks is cool, but then that doesn't really compare to a character like maybe a Tau character that's brimming with guns, and every single gun gets extra 3 attacks.
What Tau character would that be, though? Because all the ones you're thinking of are actually vehicles, because all their battle suits are vehicles.
Okay, you've undone my initial quandary, but I'm sure there are other stuff that is just,
Oh, mate, there are some crazy things. Like I said, Fugan from Eldari, madman. He's got like the most insane melter cannon.
Yeah,
that +3 shots is just not fun for anyone. Like that's basically he can one shot anything in the game with that stipulation, that twist in effect.
I mean, here's the thing, even if you picked it and you're only affecting one weapon as Fugan, you would be picking that gun and not his pistol that he's also got. I mean, personally, I would go one step further, can't be a named character and you only pick one weapon, which sort of does limit it to slightly more sensible options, because adding it to
Phil, these are
Magnus
used in competitive play, so they shouldn't be boring. They should be mad. It also adds a little bit of fun to the idea of what you do with your Warlord choice now, because it actually becomes, if you're going to turn up and use the twist, there's always a chance you could get it. So you've got to think, who am I going to give my Warlord status to? It becomes interesting.
True, yeah. I mean, I feel like this is such an old school take, but creating your own characters out of the generic data slates is sort of infinitely more interesting than everyone running the same named characters all the time.
I totally 100% agree.
With the exception, potentially, of you create your own character and sort of proxy it as a named character, which is a sort of a nice halfway house. I agree. So you can do some interesting kit bashes and have something slightly more flavoursome than a box standard commissar, for example.
We are where we are on that point, but I think, I totally agree with you. I think that is the right thing. But I like that, Lords of War. I think it's fun. I mean, the only other 3 that are here, rapid escalation. So in the first battle round, players can set up units in strategic reserves, blah, 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 blah. High octane, you don't need to roll for advantage. You always go 6.
Oh, cool. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's quite cool. And then adapt or die. For players using fixed missions, once per battle at the end of that player's turn, after scoring any VP, they can discard one of their secondary mission cards and replace it with another one. So if you're using fixed, you can twist to another fixed. And if you're using tactical missions, Twice per battle, after drawing a secondary mission card, that player can draw another secondary mission card. So you don't have to spend the CP. You can just add another.
That's super fun.
Yeah,
I think that
so that's quite nice. Adapt or Die is good. I quite like a lot of them, though. I think they're quite fun.
I think they don't have the egregious, just a straight up -1 to hit or wound, which our previous ones have had those sorts of cards in them. And I think even back into the open war sort of deck, or maybe I don't think Maelstrom particularly had them, but yeah, you get some mad twists in the older editions. So,
for sure,
I feel like they've lent more into the slightly more obscure rule mechanics, which is quite good. I think the lone operative one is quite a clever way of going about it.
So, last thing I will say, or rather, last thing we probably should talk about with regards to this deck. Is definitely the Challenger cards. They have updated the secondary missions, and they have updated the primary missions, but they are essentially, for the most part, updates. And there's some really good updates, if I'm entirely honest with you. So some examples of secondary mission updates. For example, Engage on all fronts, Phil. They've added a third stipulation, that is if you go and get yourself within 2 table quarters, you'll get 1 victory point for that. So you may remember in the past it was 2 victory points if you were in 3 table quarters, and then 4 if you were in 4. Yeah. They've now added a third stipulation, so you can get a very small amount of victory points for if you're in but 2.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that was a really nice change. I genuinely really like that. Yeah, I mean, they've changed the way that Bring It Down works in Tactical, because there didn't used to be a cap on Bring It Down. It used to be mad. So if you were up against like a very vehicle-heavy list and you pulled Bring It Down and you killed a couple of vehicles in a turn, you could get a big point swing. Now it's capped. If you get this in Tactical, you kill 1 or more monsters or vehicles and you just get 4 VP. So it's not as swingy as it used to be.
Okay, yeah, because some of the others were just like, kill a character. It doesn't matter how many you kill, you just got to do 1.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's a really smart change. Cull the Horde as well. I mean, basically, when I was at Warhammer World playing in the Golden Ticket event with the last Pariah Nexus deck, I started every game basically saying to my opponents, like, so I'll take Cull the Horde out of my deck, yeah? And they're like, yeah. You know, it was always that conversation. Like, it was completely pointless having it in there.
Yeah, I feel like this edition, I feel like maybe even in 9th edition, that's when it started. They really tried to push Horde as a sort of a meta. It was when, like, Guard and Sisters of Battle got to be 20 models per unit, for example. And it's never really come to fruition as, like, a thing.
Yeah. Well, it has done and it hasn't done. I think Horde always has a sort of place in things, but yeah, they've definitely created some interesting kind of variables with that over time. But the way they've changed Cull the Horde now is just to say it comes into effect if a unit contains 13 or more models. 13 or more. Which is a mad number, but it is more common than 25, 30 wounds or whatever it was.
Yeah, true. I thought it was something like 15 maybe, but maybe I'm wrong. But to me...
Well, the old one, it basically was done on like cumulative health characteristic, and it needed to be like, you basically needed to have like nearly 25 plus wounds in a unit for it to...
yeah, you're right. Yeah, I would have... because part of me was like, I'm surprised it isn't 12, because 12 is basically a 10-man squad with 2 characters attached to it, but maybe that's a bit too punishing. So I guess that's why. What did you say? Did you say it's 13?
13 plus, which again is
which basically is it's a 10-man squad plus probably for Guard at least a command squad. Yes. Which is fair enough at that point. That to me, anything, I guess over 10 should technically be, but I guess 10 plus characters is maybe too much.
Yeah, I think that's, like I say, I think it's a smart play. Mark for Death as well, another pretty awful one that, in Pariah Nexus has been changed for the better. So now, do you remember what Mark for Death was, Phil? Ooh. Sorry, I interrupt you while you're drinking a tea there, I apologise.
Pick, isn't it like 3 units and you got to kill one?
Yeah, so your enemy picked 3 units and you had to kill one. And if you killed any of those units, you got 5 points. However, now they've changed it. So that stipulation is still in effect. So your opponent picks 3 targets, but you pick 1. So you basically get to pick a alpha target. Oh, sorry, not an alpha. You get to pick a gamma target.
Right.
So basically, your opponent picks 3 alphas, and you pick a gamma. If you don't kill an alpha, but you kill a gamma, you get 2 victory points. If you kill one of the alphas, you get 5 victory points, which is really nice. So you get to basically pick something.
Good. It feels so far they're making it slightly easier to achieve stuff. So it's, if you're losing, you can still achieve something, even if you can't achieve like the main thing. Whereas before it felt a lot of the times if you were behind, it was sometimes a bit of a struggle to then do the actual kind of the main thing, because you just either don't have enough models or whatever it might be. So yeah, these sort of slightly more incremental options is good, all good so far.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing though, right? Because that's one of the sort of marked differences is what they've done here is they've essentially taken what they've kind of developed over the last, chapter approved, the Pariah Nexus, and just finessed it. So a lot of this is just iterative. It's just, okay, we know that wasn't the best, so we're going to fix that. They have added more, so the total number of cards now, it used to be 18. I think it's now gone up to 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, have I got that right? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, 19. So they've increased. It's gone up by 1.
Ooh.
Unless I'm missing 1. I couldn't tell you what they've actually taken out. I've identified 2 that I think are the new ones, which is a tempting target, which I believe was in Leviathan, but wasn't in Pariah Nexus. So tempting target is you control the tempting target, and the tempting target is basically a objective in no man's land specifically. So when you pull this, your opponent doesn't just pick their home objective. Right. You now basically have to use one in no man's land. So that I'm pretty sure wasn't in the last one, or if it has been, somehow throughout the entirety of Pariah Nexus, I never pulled it, which could be the case, I suppose. Although it doesn't seem likely, or I'm just forgetting. And the other one is Display of Might. I think this is a new one. I don't remember the term Display of Might. I might be wrong.
No, that both sounds new to this one.
Yeah, so when drawn, if it is the first battle round, draw a new secondary mission card and shuffle this card back into your secondary mission deck. Secondary battle round onwards, there are more units from your army than from your opponent's army, wholly within no man's land. So there you go. That is a new one, yeah, Display of Might. So yeah.
Okay.
I quite like that. Like, genuinely, I think those are all really good secondary missions.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like that one, some armies just can't physically do that one. That's a bit of a
they
luck
can all
of the
physically
draw.
do that. It's whether you choose to do it.
Well, no,
and again, that's
okay,
Battle Round 2 onwards. Battle Round 2 onwards, it's highly plausible that you could be in a situation where you move into no man's land from Battle Round 2 onwards.
No, but I mean more like, let's say you're a Knights player and you're up against an Orc Horde army. When are you going to have more units than they have in no man's land?
That is true. There's definitely some asymmetry to it in the sense there are definitely going to be armies that benefit.
Yeah,
from
my point being is if you're a very elite army, I guess Knights, Custodies, that sort of thing. And I'm not saying it because obviously I play Custodies, that I thought about it. But those kind of more elite ones will have a harder time to do that one, at least early doors. Maybe towards the end it should have evened out a bit more.
Well, it is a well-known fact, Phil, that you Custodies players have had it hard, so you definitely need to... When will they ever give you a break, eh?
Exactly, I know.
Exactly. When are they ever going to think about the Custodies players? Yeah, so anyway, look, there you go. That was those. But yeah, the big new cool thing in this particular mission deck is definitely the Challenger cards. Now, for those of you who listen to us talk about Age of Sigmar, you hopefully will be familiar with the Spearhead rules of Age of Sigmar. Great game, really worth your time. Phil, I'd love to get you around to play new Spearhead soon, because I picked up Dusty Bones, or whatever it was called, Sand Bones, and really fun looking set of missions there. But basically, the Challenger cards lean heavily into the Spearhead style mechanics. So essentially, you are allowed to access a challenge card if you are 6 victory points behind your opponent. So if you are behind your opponent to the tune of 6, let me check. I'm pretty sure I'm saying these things with certainty, but I might be wrong. Challenger cards. A player becomes a challenger. Yeah, 6 victory points. Yeah.
Which is interesting to note that the previous General's Handbook for Age of Sigmar, you got to become the underdog if you were 6 points behind. In the new one, it's 11 points. But it's just a coincidence that it's 6 points based on the old AOS General's Handbook, and that they've stolen mechanics from Spearhead.
Well, I don't think they've stolen them on the case of that they will have been given freely, because they're one company.
Yes.
And from what I can understand now, the team at AOS and 40k talk a lot to each other, which is actually, in my opinion, super cool. But what I will say is that, you're slightly wrong about that 6 point stipulation in AOS GHB 24 to 25. GHB 24 to 25, the stipulation was you were the underdog if you were behind even by 1 victory point. What you're thinking about is the rubber banding comeback mechanic, which allowed you to double turn while still taking a battle tactic. That stipulation came into effect when you were at 6 victory points behind.
Yes, you are correct. God damn you. Yes, you are. Yeah, that extra stipulation on the underdog. Yes, it was the 6. Now is the 11.
I mean, you were definitely still the underdog when you were down by 6. I don't know whether or not there was an extra name they added to it.
No, it was underdog. No. You're right. It's just the underdog, but it allowed you to double turn and still do battle tactics.
Correct. Yeah, seize the initiative. I think they called that now, or something along those lines. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that look. This is a really cool mechanic, and I think it's really good. Now, the thing is this is not going to, in my humble opinion, necessarily swing the game for you. So you cannot pick one of these in Battle Round 1, because you will not be 6 points behind in Battle Round 1, because you're going to both be on 0, right? So it's Battle Round specific. It's not turn. It's at the start of the battle round. What is the lay of the land? Pick up a challenger card if you meet the criteria. And every challenger card rewards you 3 victory points. So basically, these are a series of challenger missions that if you complete them, score up to 3 victory points. Most of them is just a flat 3. A couple of them score anything between 1 and 3. But what's really, really, really cool about it is you can try and do the challenger mission, but if you don't want to, you can spend your challenger card on the challenger specific stratagem for a cost of 0 CP. So you essentially have access to an additional exclusive stratagem for an entire battle round that will cost you 0 CP to use, but you must obviously discard the card should you choose to use it. Noting that you have to discard this card at the end of the battle round, whether you score the mission or not.
Yeah.
So you either score the mission, or you don't, or you discard the card in exchange for a stratagem. Now, we're probably not going to go through every single one of these, because there's a few of them. But to give you a sense of the kind of challenges that are put before you, we will start with the first one that I got here, which is Harbored Power. This is the stratagem-specific thing. In terms of the mission, the challenger mission is dug in. It's scored in any battle round. End of your turn. For each objective marker you control, you get 1 victory point up to 3. So at the end of the turn, if I have 3 objective markers and this challenger card, I score 3 victory points. Alternatively, I can spend it for 0 CP on Harbored Power. It happens in my shooting or fight phase. 1 unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight this phase effect. Until the end of the phase, weapons equipped by models in that unit have the hazardous ability and your choice of either lethal hits or sustained hits 1. So you can basically go, this unit now has hazardous sustained hit 1 guns. For 0 CP? It's not bad, is it?
And on anything like Titanic?
There is absolutely no stipulation around what it can and cannot affect. It can basically target anything in your army.
That's tasty.
There you go. So you can chuck that on. I mean, hazardous is pretty scary.
No, that's true. It's depending on what you're shooting. But yeah, no, that sounds interesting.
And again, a really nicely easy free victory points to score as well if you obviously opt to, pursue them. So a nice kind of, not a gimme, because you still got to obviously be on the objectives and presumably...
Hopefully you'd be on at least 2, right? If you're at all doing okay in the game. I mean, you might be so far behind and getting smashed and, you're not on any, in which case you might be in trouble and therefore you'll go, cool, I'm going to try and kill a unit.
Yeah. But what I like about that, and again, what I like about the mechanic in the general sense, is it's just a nice little boost that keeps you in the game and gives you something else to go for.
Yeah.
Will these logically win you games? Yes. But will they do it often? Probably not. But what they do is they stop the one player from drastically falling off the pace. And the changes to some of the secondary missions do that as well, right? So there's a little less swinginess in the secondaries, which is cool. And this will help you kind of stay in the race, which I like as well. The next of these is an action-based one called Self-Preservation. So the challenge here, or the challenge mission, starts in your shooting phase. One unit from your army completes at the end of your turn if that unit is more than 18 inches away from all enemy units. If completed, score 3 victory points. So basically, be 18 inches away and do an action. Well done you, you've got 3 victory points. So not bad, is it?
Okay.
But if you didn't fancy that, you could go all in, Phil. And this happens in your fight phase. One unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase effect until the end of the phase. Each time a model in that unit makes a pile-in or consolidation move, it can move up to 6 instead of 3. In addition, it does not need to end that move closer to the closest enemy model, provided it ends it as close as possible to the closest enemy unit.
Oh, okay. Sort of interesting.
Okay. But, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd be doing the action with something 18 inches away and get my 3 victory points. But
I guess if you could go, well, actually, this 6-inch pile-in will get me on an objective or allow me to do something that would potentially score me more points, then maybe you go, okay, cool, it's worth doing. But okay, interesting.
We'll do one last one, just to give a flavour of this. The Challenger stratagem in this instance is called Great Haste, 0 CP, as is standard. It's done in your movement phase. One unit from your army that has not been selected to move this phase until the end of the phase, add D6 to the move characteristic of that model. So it's not an advance, it's just D6 to your move. Noting that you could advance on top of that and have a 2D6 plus move characteristic movement, which is quite cool.
Yeah,
and that's 0 CP. But if you wanted to try and do it as a mission, it's called Over the Line, and it happens at the end of your turn. One or more units from your army, excluding aircraft and battle shocked units, are within your opponent's deployment zone, and that's 3 victory points right there. Really cool.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Look, again, I think these aren't game-breaking. They're not going to necessarily, swing it massively, but they keep you in the race, and I think it's a really nice kind of mechanism for keeping people in the game, and it creates options, and it creates conversation, and it's fun, right? Because, obviously, after a while, everyone will know every single one of the Challenger cards that are in here. You'll know them by name. They'll develop their own funny little, slangs, as people will probably... come up with interesting phrasing or terminology to express each one of them. But right now it's all new and interesting. So as you pull these, it's kind of a fun thing where you go, oh, I could do this, or I could do this. Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting than the previous one where you had to be really far behind. Or did you have to be that far behind? But it was basically
the secret missions.
Yeah, which were like an all or nothing Hail Mary that gave you, was it 50 points or 20 points?
No, they gave you a bonus 20 specifically to your primary.
But then it capped
so
your
you
max.
couldn't score more than 20 on your normal primary. You could score an additional 20 via the thing, but it meant that your maximum score for the game could be 90 as opposed to 100.
And
assuming that you painted your army.
Yeah, and with that one, it felt very much like most of the time they weren't very achievable. It was very hard to do, but could completely swing the game potentially. Like if you were a bit behind, you could come back and win it. Whereas this feels more like, as you were saying, incremental, that will probably only happen. I mean, it could happen every turn, to be honest. Like, even if you're scoring your card.
Well, not every turn. It can't happen.
Well, not the first turn, yeah. But I mean, potentially every other turn, your opponent could just be outscoring you, even if you're sort of doing okay and getting the extra free a turn, but you're still just not doing enough on the primary or the other secondaries to get it. But it should mean the points disparity between you is a lot closer than it would otherwise be.
Well, what I like about it is as a mechanic, it's something that can keep you in the race that then stops the other person running away with it. Yeah. A lot of the old Orion Nexus mechanics kind of created this really frustrating, disparaging problem where they would get so far ahead you just couldn't follow them. Whereas this will potentially keep you in the race. So if you are the kind of army that, blossoms in battle rounds 4 and 5, you can, potentially be in a stronger position to kind of clutch a win back, So it helps potentially develop strategies or armies that, don't need to go kind of all in at the start, that can effectively, build strategies around more long tail gameplay.
And I like that it sort of gives you something to do, because sometimes you're behind, you draw 2 completely dud cards for your secondaries, and you're like, oh god, I can't do any of these. You could at least go, well, let's draw this other card, and, maybe you'll get a terrible card. And even then you can be like, oh, I can't do this card, but I can at least use the stratagem, and that gives me some joy rolling some extra dice or whatever it might be. So it gives you, it's like the feel good mechanic rather than the feel bad mechanic. So I like that it gives you extra choice in how you're playing your turn, which is good. So really positive.
Even if you're losing, you're still getting something out of it, and I think that's a really positive thing.
You're still having fun.
Well, hopefully. I mean, this is the thing. I genuinely, as I sort of said already, I love it. I think this is a really, really, really good step forwards for Warhammer 40,000. It feels like a product of the new development team that are working behind the scenes on the game. It feels like a product of collaboration between, the different game design teams, the Age of Sigmar team, the specialist game department, the obviously Warhammer 40,000 team. It's got a lot of really fun stuff to it, and I like that it's iterative. I like that they are kind of just giving us a more refined, more engaging, enjoyable, achievable version of what we had in Pariah Nexus. Pariah Nexus had some really obvious problems, and this mission deck addresses most of them. It's just a crying shame that you won't be able to buy it for the next 2 months if you want to use it. I mean,
that's true.
Yeah.
I think so. To sort of my summary of this would be the spearhead style kind of catch up mechanics is fantastic. When we first saw them, I was like, I would have loved this for Age of Sigmar, the core game. So it's great that 40k has pinched that mechanic, because it is a fantastic one. My one criticism is, yes, it's iterative, and that is good, I think, especially from a competitive format, but my assumption is that it's maybe too samey, whereas in previous editions of the game, every mission deck tended to be sort of wildly different, and it allowed you to feel like you were playing something more different and interesting. Now, I don't know what the missions are like in terms of the match play missions themselves. I assume it's still effectively the same deployment zones, the same missions. Basically. So it is, if you've played so much match play 40k, maybe you'll feel like this is nothing really new. It's just a finessed final version of it, which is good. But then actually my criticism is somewhat toned down, because if you don't care too much about match play, you've got actually loads more choice. You've got these, you've got the asymmetricals, you've got the 1,000-point stuff, and I'm really glad that that's in there. So, ultimately this sounds like, as you saying at the very beginning, the best version of this deck that they've ever done. I guess the question is, where would they go from here going forwards? Because it feels like the secondary cards are so finessed. Would they just go, okay, right, we've got to somehow come up with completely new secondaries next time round and sort of go back to sort of square one with it all?
Well,
who knows?
I mean, we know that we're going to get a new edition of Warhammer 40,000. So in 2026. So this is essentially this is a 10th edition product. So this is essentially the end of this. What they do next, who knows? They could be really cool and experimental and do some really mad stuff with 11th edition 40k. I hope they do. I'm very excited for it. I really genuinely want to kind of go all in on 11th edition. I think 10th has been a really weird mixture, and it's had a bit of an interesting impact on me. But I'm very excited for 11th edition because I'm a massive Warhammer 40,000 fan, and I want to really get back to truly loving them and engaging with the game. Age of Sigmar is in a great spot at the moment. I'm having a great time playing that as well. I am enjoying playing 40k still, but I accept that I'm not necessarily where I was with prior editions of 40k, where I was a little bit more in tune with the kind of movers and shakers in the more kind of upper echelons of the meta, if you will. But no, genuinely, I think it's a really good thing. I just think that, what they've done is just really smart. It makes sense. It's nice. It's fun. I think genuinely the inclusion of the 1,000-point variables is really exciting to me as well. Again, completely probably unqualified to say it, but I think 1,000-point tournaments and 1,000-point games would potentially offer a more interesting way of playing Warhammer 40,000 right now. I think it would allow more people to get into the game, but I also think it would allow you as collectors, players, experienced veterans, the opportunity to be more experimental and try new factions and do different things, because all of a sudden it's like, rather than needing, 20 units, I only need 10, and it becomes a much more accessible experience and potentially makes for a better competitive experience when playing multiple games in a day. But that's something that I accept will not change. No one is going to move away from doing the 2,000-point system. I get it, but ultimately I think this is a nice step towards that, and I'm definitely looking forward to playing some smaller 1,000-point games more regularly of it, because I think that would be a cool thing. But chapter approved, I think really interesting. I'm trying to figure out a way of meaningfully segueing into then moving over to the General's Handbook, because there's no real kind of obvious link other than this is the Age of Sigmar version of the new annual update that has happened shortly after the release of the mission deck. I mean, essentially 2 weeks after the mission deck, this has come out, that being the General's Handbook 25 to 26, where the mission deck and the General's Handbook feel quite different from the outset, and we can talk about this more as we conclude our thoughts on the General's Handbook. This feels almost like a new edition of Age of Sigmar. Like the way that this book impacts the game feels actually quite revolutionary, whereas Chapter Approved feels quite iterative, as we've already said. So I think from the outset, this is quite interesting, because I hear the common vernacular amongst Age of Sigmar fans when they talk about this General's Handbook. They generally refer to it as a new edition. Like, most people go, this edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar.
Really?
Whereas, honestly, mate, yeah, like, I've been listening to a bunch of different, content creators, people, speaking with friends. People say that. They're like, I'm really excited about this edition of AOS. And they're talking about this GHB. And maybe it's just something that's, I've been more attuned to, so maybe I've been hearing it more. But genuinely, it does feel like the changes they've made in this have more of a dramatic impact on the game than the chapter approved mission deck for Warhammer 40,000. But that's my opening statement.
I wouldn't call it an addition, but I sort of see where people have come from. And I think since basically around, I want to say, second edition of AOS, the General's Handbook has been a thing, and it has always quite drastically changed the way the game plays. They've always sort of done around a sort of a narrative hook. They've sometimes gone, okay, cool, your generals are going to be really good. Or, for example, in the last one, it was all about sort of like your bodyguard units. So you had these bodyguard units that got to protect or be better when they're hanging out with your general and stuff. So they gave you something to latch on to. And I always thought that was a great hook for that 40k could do, where they go, oh yeah, cool, for this 1 year, we're going to make tanks really good, and they're going to, like, you know, score more victory points when they're on objectives or something like that. And then they go, cool, next time it's all going to be about stuff that flies. You know, they could give you these ways that keep the game fresh, so to speak, which is what I was just saying about the difference between iterative and something a bit new. So yeah, I think you're right. And I think, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a new edition. And I don't think the changes from having read them, I mean, it feels very fresh, and I think we're all very excited to play it. That's for sure. And it's worth noting that it looks very different from the 40k. The 40k was a deck of cards. This is a book, a bunch of cards, and some objective markers. Like, it's a whole pack, which in and of itself is good and bad. I think it's a lot of faff to keep hold of now, so I've kept my box to put them all in, because you've got to now cart all of these around, whereas before the ring-bound book was just a nice simple thing that you just had, and that was it.
I loved the ring-bound books. It is a real shame that we don't have them this time around, but I think the cards are a perfectly reasonable change, and I think the thing that I suppose is useful is first of all, I'll say that the fact that they give you the manifestations or the endless spells on cards is a big win to me, because ultimately that was one of the biggest problems with the old GHP. If you were using the physical books, you always had to kind of flick back from missions and try and remember what things did, and that was a fact. Whereas now you got it on a card, so you only need to bring the relevant cards to what you're taking. I think that's a big win. And then also they give you the cards for the battle tactics, which we'll talk about in a bit. Yeah. And as well as that, also the battle plans or the missions. So again, you know, yes, the book is important because it contains rules and it's updated and it has all the latest stipulations, changes, clarifications, etc. But ultimately, if you learn the new kind of rule set, you don't really need to carry the book around with you, although I would recommend that you do so, because it's always good to have it as a reference.
Yeah, but basically, in the General's Handbook, the book is the least important thing. The most important thing...
Well, long term. It's very important out of the game.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's like you need the objectives, and ultimately, I mean, you could play with your own custom objectives, but it's very difficult. So there's 6 objectives. They have paired them off in colours and symbols.
They've not paired them off, not all of them.
They're not paired, but some of them are paired. Is it at least 2? And then
two of them are paired.
So 4 in total paired, and then 2 individual. That's it. So if you have existing objectives, you could technically play it, but you'd have to, use dice or something to denote the equivalent. And ultimately, when you're gaming, you'll be using the card. So yeah, the fact it's not ring bound, less of an issue, because the 2 things you needed the most for it to be ring bound was to have your double page open of the mission, and then, as you pointed out, you're often trying to faff around to flick to find your endless spell that you need, and then you go, I've lost where my mission is, and you go back. Whereas now, actually, that is just a book to refer to rules. They point out that there are basically changes. This is the first time where we finally get to see what this whole modular rules concept is. And it's sort of, as I suggested years ago, it's just a gimmick. It's basically, they've gone, we're updating the advanced rule module, which is basically everything other than the core rules, which is kind of the only 2 modules. I'm sure there were more. I'm sure there was more other than maybe like the mission back.
Well, technically the manifestations is its own module and blah blah blah. So they've changed that. So they've attributed points to those, and they haven't massively amended any of the actual kind of core the battle tome, or not battle tome, the battle scroll rules for individual manifestations. But what they have done is add like the ability to attribute points to them and so on and so forth. But you're right, but that's where I think. And I think this is why it feels more new edition-y than maybe the 40k thing, but maybe it's more because of where they are in the life cycle, right? Like this chapter approved mission deck is the penultimate, or actually, this is the ultimate expression of Warhammer 40,000's 10th edition. They've gone through all of the kind of tweaks and changes and fixes. You know, the balanced data slate didn't really contain anything massive that wasn't in it already. It was very iterative. So I think that's the thing. It's like a lot of the stuff that probably feels more substantial around this General's Handbook isn't even necessarily a result of the General's Handbook, but more just a result of the fact that they've used this as a moment in time to introduce a number of sweeping changes to all sorts of things, not least, obviously, the kind of core mission systems and things like that. So there's a lot of compounding elements around the release of this book that has a kind of wider effect. Yeah,
so it's changes to the advanced rules. It's removing the season rules from the last season that was quite fundamental to how you sort of built and used your army. That's changed and been replaced with these new rules. You sort of mentioned, the secondaries that you pick have changed. Before it used to be... I want to say there was like 6 generic ones, but then also faction-specific ones, and at the start of every turn you picked one to do. That has now completely changed. So that is sort of quite wild in terms of, like, probably like the biggest change, I would say, out of all of them, if you had to maybe pick one. And obviously all the missions are different as well. They're all completely brand new. Whereas the last year's one, I was going to say edition for a second, the previous season, is the more accurate term than edition. The last season, previously on, it was like the best of, the greatest hits of all the previous years and editions, their favourite picks of missions. Whereas this time they're all completely brand new. So it feels like this is what, full-fed AOS is about.
Yeah, and like this is again, 4th edition Age of Sigmar was quite an interesting series of changes, and they did a bunch of stuff with not least obviously updating the rules, but they also massively overhauled the army. So they did huge index releases, which were widely praised at the time for being certainly superior to what happened with the indexes that they introduced in early 10th edition for Warhammer 40,000. Early Warhammer 40,000 10th edition indexes were obviously plagued with incredibly strong, powerful things that were just completely out of whack with each other. The internal, not even the internal balance, but just the balance between armies was quite dramatically different. Now, to suggest that Age of Sigmar got it perfect is not correct, because Nighthawk were very strong from the outset, as were Lumineth Realm Lords. These things were always quite strong from the go. But, they were tweaked quite quickly, although, to be honest with you, they've still kind of consistently been strong throughout.
Not Nighthawk, though. Not my Nighthawk.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to a tier listing video today, and the guys put Nighthorn in broken tier still.
Well, okay.
And they made some very compelling arguments for why they belong there.
Here's the thing. Statistically, they have been third from the bottom for the last couple of, rounds of stats. Yeah. They might have gotten better because of...
drops in the missions.
Potentially missions, potentially tweaks to how certain things have worked, which might benefit them. They've obviously got a new faction terrain, which is now thrown into the mix because that's new. Potentially. I'm not necessarily sold on the idea until I see it with my own dice and eyes, and I win some games. Then I'll believe it.
Well, Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, it's interesting to see. But anyway, my point is that, yeah, when they did the start of fourth, they did a lot of work. And I think they didn't necessarily cheap out on the idea of doing a best hits for battle tactics, or rather for missions and stuff. But it made sense because it was a nice, easy win for them at the time. They're like, right, okay, we'll do this. And then next year's GHB will come back with something new, which they definitely did with the new battle tactics system. So essentially, yeah, before, battle tactics were one of a few different options. As Phil said, there were 6 generic, and then there were an additional 8 that were faction specific, and those were tied to the Grand Alliances. So within Age of Sigmar, there are 4 Grand Alliances: the Alliance of Order, Chaos, Destruction, and Death. And essentially,
so
each of those
there were 2 per Grand Alliance.
Correct, yeah. So 8 total, 2 per each of the Grand Alliances. Now, that created a bit of a weirdness anyway, because there were certain armies within Destruction that did really well with the Destruction Grand Alliance ones, and then there were other armies that didn't do it so well. Similarly with Death and Chaos. They all had these kind of weird nuances to them in terms of how those kind of battle tactics worked with specific armies, and also, you know, how those battle tactics stacked up against each other. Ultimately, when you add faction-specific things, it becomes difficult to kind of add or balance those. So, quite rightly, in my opinion, they've done away with faction-specific ones with these battle tactics, but they've entirely changed the way they work. So before, there are a bunch of different options, and at the start of your turn, you'd say, this turn, I'm trying to do this, and if you completed the stipulation at the end of your turn, you were rewarded with the points. Typically, it was 4 points for a battle tactic, but again, there could be a example where that isn't the case, but typically it was 4 victory points for scoring your battle tactic. Now, rather than basically picking a battle tactic each turn based on what you think you're most likely to achieve, when you're writing your army list, you pick 2 battle tactics that essentially have 3 different stipulations within them that you then need to accomplish throughout the course of the game. And you score one of these sections per turn. You have to score the first section in order to score the second, and then subsequently the third. So effectively, each one of these battle tactics starts relatively easy, gets a bit hard, and then gets really hard as you go down. But effectively what it means is that you can score, I believe, up to 50 points with these battle tactics, which admittedly is 10 less victory points than the total amount you could possibly get if you scored all 6 battle tactics, or rather, all 6
30
sections.
in total, because it's 5 per part.
Sorry, yes, yeah, but I think it's capped, isn't it? At like, is it capped at 20, or am I going mad? Can you get a total of 30 out of these?
I would have thought so.
I don't know where I got 50 from. You know what it is? I've got 40k in Age of Sigmar swirling around in my brain at the moment. So maybe there is no cap. Maybe you could score a maximum of 60 flipping heck. A maximum of 30 out of these stipulations. That would make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to. No, I don't think it does cap. I don't think I've seen anywhere that it caps, and it also makes sense. I mean, you've got 6 that you could possibly do in 5 turns. So technically, actually no, but you can do 2 from your 2 individual ones. So you can actually do them all in. All the turns, basically, because you can technically do 2 a turn at most.
Yeah, but 1 from each discipline.
Yes.
1 from each battle tactic, essentially. Did we do a good job of explaining that, Phil, or did I butcher that?
No, I think it makes sense. I mean, we could potentially read a couple out to give everyone the gist of what's going on.
Yeah, because where this is really interesting to me, and again, one of the things that really stands out to me is when you look at the 40k stuff. The 40k stuff is really quite enabling. They're not punishing. Like most of the stuff in 40k you can do, or if you can't do it, you have mechanics to get rid of it or discard it for, benefits and so on. With this, you kind of build them into your battle plans, or rather you build them into your army lists, and essentially this is what you do. And if you're playing at a tournament, you basically stipulate this at the start.
Yeah, you're locked in.
And you're stuck with
which I'm not necessarily that keen on the idea. I think if you got to see what your opponent had, you then picked a bit like the old grand strategies of 3rd edition. That would maybe be a bit more interesting, but then maybe makes it a bit too easy to achieve. Yeah, my initial criticism of it is it feels like you're being told how to play the game, whereas before, when you got to pick per turn, you can at least react to the situation presented in front of you, whereas this feels like this is dictating how you need to play the game. And maybe the conundrum is that you've got to solve that yourself. But I sort of don't like being told how to do things, and I'd rather make those decisions myself. But I guess maybe when you're playing it with these in mind, and that's where the skill comes in potentially. But yeah, it's too early doors to really say either way if this is good or bad.
Well, I suppose this is the thing, right? Like when you consider that in the old systems, I'm fairly certain. So yeah, before you would have had 8 different battle tactics that you could have picked between every turn.
But you could only do one of them.
You could only do one of them, and you could only score 5 of them per game, and you got to pick. But I suppose their theory is we don't want this to be a situation where everything's guaranteed all the time. And I've noticed that because when we started in 2022, we were using 2022's General's Handbook.
Yeah.
And 2022 to 23's General's Handbook had really easy battle tactics. Like, it was like, go over there and stand next to that rock. Yay! I've done it. Yeah. It was like super easy.
The next season got a lot harder.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. 23 to 24 got really hard, but not crazy difficult if you leaned into it and built around it and took wizards and blah, blah, blah. And then the 24-25 season that we've just left, that had some tough stuff, but not impossible. It was more, again, you started getting used to it. Whereas I think their logic might be, really, we want to give you less options, but we want to make them harder because we don't want you to guarantee getting everything all the time, because the idea is that we want to make this difficult to do. Now, spoilers, the problem is with that is that because it's Games Workshop and because they've given you 6 different options, inevitably there are things that stand out as being better from the outset. And I think this is going to definitely be one of the problems with this from the outset, is that people are going to basically lean into the same 2 options quite frequently, because it feels like there are basically there's basically 2 quite obviously strong options, and then one other situationally good option, depending on what your army is, and then there's 3 that seem unnecessarily complicated.
I mean, I sort of disagree, but I think the 2 that seem obvious to you are really good for your army's play style. So basically, the fighty ones feel much easier to achieve if you're a fighty army, but the slightly more shenanigan ones for armies that aren't quite as fighty in terms of they don't quite have as much punch are actually harder for them to achieve. So yeah, for certain armies, I feel like you've got a bit of a gimme because your ones should be more easier to achieve than maybe the ones that are a bit more based around movement and stuff. But we don't know for sure. But I think that's maybe people's hot take on it, and it does feel like some of the battle tactics do synergize better together. So you'll probably see the same reoccurring picks or pairs of battle tactics depending on your sort of play style. And it'll be interesting to see, I guess, once people start playing the missions, they go, okay, I thought this was the initially good one, but actually these ones that were a bit more obscure that people weren't looking at might be, you come to the fore because they play better in the missions themselves once because it's all well on, in good theory hammering it, but then once you get some games under your belt, it always ends up being slightly different.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And I don't want to sort of necessarily suggest that, like, this isn't something that, isn't going to change or may not hold true with more exposure and experience. And I really do believe in the Age of Sigmar team in terms of their ability to kind of adapt and change things. So I do think if there does become a very obvious problem, that they will then obviously take steps to correct it very quickly. But yeah, I think ultimately what's happened with these particular battle tactics is, at least out of the gate, the missions become way more kind of primary orientated, and then the battle tactics effectively become more supplementary. But when you can take battle tactics that also lean into the primary mission objective of stand on the objectives and hold them, you can start to see where certain battle tactics will be powerful. Like, for example, Restless Energy, which is the second of the battle tactics cards. The first stipulation of it, the affray. Is that how you pronounce it, Phil? An affray?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the affray section of it, which is the first section of it, the first thing that you need to achieve in order to move down to the next bit, is Water with Blood. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control an objective marker that was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn. So again, makes sense. It's what you need to do. You need to take objectives off your opponent. So that's a really good start. Next is the Strike, which is Evasive Species. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control every objective marker within enemy territory. If there are no objective markers within enemy territory, you complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control every objective marker that was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn. So again, hard to do because you've got to be winning.
Wildly hard to do, I would say.
But if you're winning, very easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, some of the missions, so one of them has 3 objectives in your opponent's deployment zone. I mean, on the most, it's normally 1, to be fair.
Yeah. And then the last one, by the way, for this one, the Domination, all routes entwined. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control every objective marker on the battlefield. Again, it's a win more stipulation. But it's a win more stipulation based on the fact that you're going to try and table your opponent and smash them to bits. I acknowledge, Phil, that this is not super easy to do, but it leans into the army. It leans into the primary, thus makes it obvious.
Here's the thing: if you're taking your orcs,
Iron Jaws.
So your Iron Jaws, this makes perfect sense. You want to run at your opponent into their deployment zone. You want to smash their face in. I want to run at them often in their deployment zone and try and maybe pin them in there and try and sort of outscore objectives early doors. But I am very rarely tabling them. I'm very rarely holding on to objectives for the whole game. Normally by the end, I've only got a few units left. So my army cannot do this whatsoever. But I appreciate certain other armies, like you and Richard with his Slaves to Darkness. I imagine he'd be doing this all the time. It's like a no-brainer for your 2 armies, I think.
Well, indeed. And bear in mind, Phil, I've mostly been maining Skaven the last 6 months.
I can't imagine you're Skaven doing this, though, either. I wouldn't have thought...
Skaven would do it easily.
Would you? I mean, I guess you've got lots of... with your Gnorholes moving around...
the damage output of the Skaven army is... Anyway,
that's also true.
Yeah, but anyway, look, I think, yeah. And the other one that's obviously good, by the way, as well, is Treasures or Intercept and Recover, which is basically pick 3 enemy units or your opponent picks 3 of their units. They get a bit of treasure. Give them a bit of treasure. And then when they've got the treasure, if they get killed, you get 5 victory points. So that's like, again, leans into the overall kind of gameplay system, i.e. I need to kill my opponent, therefore I will make them more valuable by giving them treasure, and then when I kill them, I'll get that treasure, and then everything's good. So those are like the 2 that don't seem like they have too many added stipulations. The third one, which is actually really good, but I think situational depending on the army, is Scouting Force, because that's quite interesting, although it does have some stipulations. And then, mate, Scouting Party genuinely, or Scouting Force, sorry, I think it's actually really good.
But I think it's hard to do. Let me read it out and we can discuss
read it. Out, Phil, please.
So this one has a stipulation beforehand. So at the start of a battle, every friendly non-hero infantry and non-hero cavalry unit wholly within friendly territory, which is your deployment zone, becomes a scout unit. You cannot complete this battle tactic with scout units that are in combat. That's a big downside. Replacement units that replace scout units are also scout units, so it just means if you can bring something back, they still count as being scout units. So the first one, your Affray, which is, I don't know why I just didn't number them 1, 2, 3. You've got Affray, Strike, and Domination. But for your Affray, you've got Raiding Party, so you complete its battle tactic at the end of your turn. If there are 3 or more friendly scout units wholly outside friendly territory, which sometimes is easy to do if there's neutral territory, but if the board is just made up of yours and your opponent's territories, it's a lot harder to do, or at least for turn 1. Turn 2 should be doable if you've got lots of movement. But again, it basically means 3 units not in combat, which for a game all about combat isn't an ideal thing, but I do like it as a concept.
But you just mean you have to get into combat so you're going to win, because ultimately, if you kill the thing, you're not in combat anymore.
Well, that is also true.
And power through as you mentioned,
is very power through
power through. Yeah.
Is a good way. But the one downside is your opponent, you can set up, you'd be like, cool, I'm spending this turn 3 units, I'm deliberately not going to have them in combat. And then your opponent is like, cool, I'm going to countercharge you and make you be in combat with me. And if you're stuck in combat, it completely undoes that, turn of trying to have stuff, not do anything. Because when you're not in combat, you could be on an objective, sure. But for the most part, normally it means that thing that you spent points on isn't doing anything and is wasting valuable points that you've spent on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me.
I suppose it.
Oh, go on.
Oh, please, yeah. No.
I'll go through the other 2. So for your Strike, you've got Bold Explorers. You complete its battle tactic at the end of turn 3 or more. Oh, sorry. At the end of your turn, if 3 or more objective or terrain features that you control in any combination are being contested by enemy friendly scout units, those objectives and terrain features must be within enemy territory. I love that one. I think that's very thematic because, again, you don't have to be in combat, but it's not just objectives, it's terrain features as well, which I think is very cool. Nighthawk, for example, have a new Giran artifact, which basically powers up the more terrain that you contest. So your hero can get +1 attack for each terrain feature you contest, up to a maximum +8. So that would tie in quite well. So you can have a guy that normally has maybe 5 attacks, has 10 attacks, if you control a lot of terrain, for example. And then the last one, the domination one, is Courageous Adventurers. You complete its battle tactic at the end of your turn. If a friendly scout unit that was not set up this turn is contesting a terrain feature that you control, that is wholly within enemy territory, and that is more than 6 inches from friendly territory. So interestingly, what's cool about that one is it also works with faction terrain.
Yes. And
Nighthaunt can set up faction terrain around the table. So potentially those things do play into this. So when I first read them all, I was like, Scouting Force feels like one that I could do more so than, the aggressive ones.
I think that's the thing. I think Scouting Force is definitely for Nighthaunt specific, or Skaven, or not that anyone's playing them these days, but Cadron Overlords. They're good options for those kind of
shooty army.
Mobile.
Yeah, is great for Scouting Force because it's like Cadron Overlords don't want to be in combat; they just want to stand back and shoot at you. So actually, for them, this is a very good pick, I would say.
Yeah, it's just, that's the thing. We'll talk about the mad change to kind of ranged weapons in a moment, because I think that's one of those big stipulations. But we definitely should have started with the battle tactics for sure.
No, that's true. I was going to say the one thing I really like about the treasures one is, for me, I was like, this is great conversion potential to make some little treasure objective markers. Well, not objective markers, treasure markers to either have for my units if my opponent picks treasures, or for me to put on my opponent's units Because Nighthawk have quite a few cool minis from either Lady Alinda and the Black Coach, where they're literally holding treasures already.
Very nice.
So if I could get hold of spares of those, it would work quite handy. I mean, otherwise I've got spare minis, but I'd need to find little treasures to give them. So maybe I need to do that.
I need to, get some little rats holding warp stones or something.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
You get, with the weapons crew, if you don't build the version with the rat carrying the gun, basically there's there's a model that would be perfect for that, is what I'm basically saying, from the weapons team. That could be cool.
Yeah, but I love stuff when there's conversion options or potential of something to do stuff. Yeah, so that is...
It's what I miss in a way, the old objective markers from older editions where you were given the opportunity to put a bit of a flourish on it. I quite liked how back in 7th edition everyone was kind of turning up with their own objective markers personalised to their armies and things.
And cool. To be honest, I think first, second, I can't remember if the first actually did, but the second and third edition AOS ones were really great. They look pretty cool.
Yeah, those were interesting for sure. I mean, they had that weird thing where back then they were using 6-inch auras, weren't they? Which was a whole crazy thing. But
some of those objectives were like oval, and others like they weren't consistent sizes. That was the weird thing about them. Yes. But the actual miniature sculpts on them were very cool. There was like a stack of treasure. There was a weapons rack. There was all sorts of things. Yeah.
But yeah, the other three that we didn't talk about, Attuned to Gyran, Raffle Cycles, and Master the Paths, all start with relatively kind of easy-ish ones. Like Master the Paths is kill a hero. Attuned to Gyran is have 2 friendly units win 3 at the center. And the Cycles one is you just have to have more objectives than your opponent. So all of those ones start really well. But when you get into like the secondary parts of them, again, Attuned to Gyran, you have to have 2 units retreat and then 2 units, separate units charge, and that one of those units has to charge into one of the things that the other unit retreated from.
That was basically the same battle tactic that you had in the last season, where stuff fell back and then stuff charged in. I think the extra stipulation is it has to charge into the same thing that you fell back from. Whereas last edition it didn't. So I, as a Nighthawk person who likes charging and falling back, I quite like that one. But for others it's quite punishing. Like falling back, normally you take damage. Nighthawk can mitigate that by 1 unit. It can't mitigate it for both of them. Whereas at the start of the edition they could mitigate it for all of them if they picked the right detachment. So yeah, on the whole I can see why people wouldn't like that one. Raffle Cycles is also a weird one, because that one you have to be the underdog to achieve it, which you can't really control that, and it either forces you to deliberately try and make yourself the underdog by being underpointed in your previous turn, so you've got to sort of deliberately lose a bit, or it's a good one if you go first, because it then forces your opponent to second think, do a double take on whether they're going to double turn you or not.
Yeah. Which, again, like...
Because that makes you the underdog, for those that don't know.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's just the thing is it's an extra stipulation. It's a load of extra stuff you have to kind of...
And it's sort of out of your control to an extent as well.
And that's the thing why... But I do genuinely think they're going to address these ones and come up with it. But on the whole, I think it's a really interesting system. And I think when done in concert with the changes they've made to the kind of main battle plans and missions, I think you start to really see a very interesting game developing. Because obviously we said before that the objective markers have been changed. When you buy this season's General's Handbook, it comes with 6 objective markers, 4 of which, or rather, 4 of which share colours, or rather 2 of the point
two
is
green and 2 are red, and then there's like a purple and a blue.
A purple and a blue.
Which I have
Not the
to
best
say,
colours for colourblind people. Yeah.
Especially so on the mission cards, the colouring is very hard to distinguish, and then on some of them they have tiny icons to represent them in the rules, which you've got to have keen eyesight to work it out. It is doable, but if I had poor eyesight, or I was colourblind, or I wasn't looking at these cards in a brightly lit room, I would probably struggle sometimes. But for the most part,
learn the symbols, mate.
Well, exactly. You got to really look at the symbols.
That's it. But but that becomes, because that's where it gets super interesting, and that's where things start to get kind of mad with it, because they really are now, because they are able to essentially denote a particular kind of value or a particular status to a particular objective. They've started to lean really heavily into that within the mission structure, and now it really creates a lot of very interesting, ever-changing kind of tactical stipulations around missions. So before, all objectives were somewhat equal. Yes, okay, fair enough. There were instances where those in enemy territory were worth more than those located in your own territory. In what 40k players would refer to as no man's land. So these things are present in AOS, but now, with the different naming, colours, symbols, every mission kind of starts to muck around with the format of what's worth what, when, and that's really interesting because it
used to be basically hold 1, hold 2, or hold more objectives pretty much across all the missions, with the exception of a couple which were a bit more mad, right? Whereas I think these, on the whole, are all a bit mad in terms of your point scores. And I think maybe 1 or 2 is sort of a bit more like the classic sort of style of scoring. So, yeah, definitely a bit more effort needs to go into making sure you know what you're doing in these missions, because they vary so different from each other. In addition to, they all have like an underdog mechanic, which is like their mission twist. So if you're behind, you can normally do something, and quite often that is to do with the different objectives that are on the table.
And I think that's the thing, though, that's so really interesting, because as much as I'm not madly thrilled about the battle tactics change, I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't or couldn't have changed things. I just think that I liked the way it was before. Again, I haven't spent enough time playing New Age of Sigmar, so I'll reserve judgment until I've played a few games of it. But I think where it shines is more these missions. I think the missions are really fun and interesting and varied in really cool ways, that in a way kind of compensate for the fact that the battle tactics are actually, the way they are. I think the missions are just so much more interesting and dynamic in the way that they function. The battle tactics do now kind of feel quite supplementary and quite secondary, which actually almost sort of makes more sense, right? Like, the game is definitely more about building armies that play into the missions, and then the battle tactics become effectively the kind of icing on your victory point cake, I suppose, which is cool. I genuinely really like the change. I think the way that they've built the missions is really fun. Or the battle plans, as they're called in Age of Sigmar. They've done some really mad ones. They've got ones where you're deploying on the same side of the board, i.e. that you've got 2 areas of territory, but they're basically both situated in the right-hand side of the board, or right hand to one, left-hand side to the other. But the same half of the board, and then the entire other side of the board is just no man's land. So that is kind of mad. There's just lots of really cool, fun, interesting things in there in terms of how they built the missions. So as much as I could grumble about some of the battle tactic stuff, I genuinely really, really like the missions in this in this General's Handbook. They seem really fun and creative, which I'm really hugely in favour of.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I like how the sort of the flavour text around the season fits in with the symbols on the objectives. Like, they explain that the trees in Goran, which is the realm of life, have the sort of sigils kind of carved into the trees, and they have sort of these mystical ley lines that are flowing from one place to the other, which is why you have these like paired objectives, which is kind of a really clever way of doing it. And I think in one of the missions, and it might only be one of the missions, where like to score points on those objectives, you need to control the matching colours, which is a clever sort of way of playing the mission. I sort of wish there was a couple more that had that sort of mechanic in, but I mean, they definitely sound really interesting to play. It's probably worth noting that all the maps have terrain on them as well. Like they give you the sort of the stipulated terrain placements, and probably the one issue people will come up against is that Games Workshop don't really sell much terrain for AOS.
No, and the problem is as well is it's the over prevalence or consistent use of terrain that they definitely don't really sell at all, which is the obscuring terrain. So small obscuring terrain. The only kit that GW sell are the wildwood trees, or what they call them, whatever they are. The whalewoods, whatever.
The wildwoods, but they're also technically faction terrain as well, which I always find a bit odd.
Yeah, well, they're both, right? Like they can be used as both, but essentially, one of those trees, you buy them in a set free. One of those trees technically is a small piece of obscuring terrain, but and then also not technically, you can also buy the barracks from Warhammer the Old World, and those barracks kits, as in the tower, is also a small piece of obscuring terrain. How that actually works in game is pretty mad, but as per the rule book, that particular kit that they sell is a small obscuring piece of terrain. But other than those two things, they don't sell anything else, and it's quite prolific. There is, as far as I can tell, actually officially, as per the rulebook, no medium-sized pieces of obscuring terrain, although in the General's Handbook, Phil, I can confirm that they have confirmed in this General's Handbook that free trees, so the free trees, are a medium piece of obscuring terrain.
So you've got to, like, Power Ranger them together. You'll know the technical term, Dan. When they all form one giant thing.
Oh, no, actually, as per the image, I actually might have miscounted this. There might only be two woods used to depict a... or maybe I'm looking at the wrong diagram. Hang on. And by the way, this is by no means a perfect science, because I think they just took a generic photo and then just attribute... Oh, yeah, here it is, yeah. So on pages... there is no page number associated to them, but in matched play, battle plan, maps... basically they specify different terrain locations, and they have examples, and the wildwood is which is number 6, is stated as being a medium obscuring terrain feature with all 3 bits associated to it. Now, in the rulebook, Phil, that was used to be called a large piece of obscuring terrain, but now it has been clarified in this as being a medium one. So there you go. You can use the trees, I suppose. Get trees everywhere. Or just do what most people do and just build some custom Age of Sigmar terrain.
In 2 missions, you need 4 pieces of medium trees. So,
yes.
I mean...
yeah, it's pretty wild.
That's got to be at least over 100 quid, if not 150.
Yeah, I think you can buy them on like Element for like 34 quid for the 3 trees.
A bargain to buy 4 of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, though. The amount of this stuff is kind of weird because, like, I mean, 40k has kind of been weird with the way they've done it now, but at least they sell kind of modular ruins that you can kind of just about get around to making sense in the shapes that you're looking to do. But yeah, AOS is kind of weird because, yeah, right now there's a lot of stuff that they don't sell. Obviously, even in the General's Handbook, they're encouraging you to build your own terrain or do your own thing if you want to. So, I mean, again, it sort of is what it is, but yeah, the thing is to really kind of express the game and play it the way that it's kind of intended. In quotation marks.
Do you know the one thing
that they need to have a good switch terrain?
Do you know the one thing they literally make you do in terms of playing the game? They make you play on a flat table. Because the objectives are the pie plate ones which literally everyone does play. But if you had those old Age of Sigmar Realm and Battle tiles, you would struggle. If you want a hill, you will struggle.
Well, Phil, you're wrong there, because the old Age of Sigmar Realm of Battle boards did not have hills.
No, I know, they were relatively flat, but they had some undulating embossed pieces that wouldn't quite lay flat. But for
that was a 6x4 board, Phil. You know, that was 6 foot by 4 foot. That's not the done thing anymore.
No, I know, but basically they want you to play on completely flat terrain, which is fine, and I'm sort of coming around to the concept of it, and it is what it is. Especially for Age of Sigmar, it makes sense, because I would hate to have a bunch of minis rolling down the side of a hill.
I will say this, though, for Age of Sigmar. I think Age of Sigmar as a rule set still does a better job than current modern 40k at accommodating more interesting terrain layouts. I think the rules as they're written do more to kind of accommodate.
Well, you've got different terrain types that isn't just ruins, right?
So I think that's the thing. Like, I think if you wanted to create a really cool thematic kind of like floating isle board, AOS could facilitate that, although there is a weird stipulation with Age of Sigmar if you're following the rules as written, which is that all combat ranges for miniatures is 3 inches horizontally, infinite vertical.
Yes, yeah. I remember reading that, and it was it was quite interesting, because it basically says if you can't fit on, then you count. But I was like, are you meant to still be able to roll to like be able to reach it? And it was, I thought, quite poorly worded. Let's see if I can.
Well, I think again, it's just obviously the way they assert within this particular thing. And obviously, if you're the kind of person who's got a really cool, fun, thematic board, and you're playing interesting narrative games of Age of Sigmar, you're probably the sort of person who can figure out how to work around this without having to refer to this flipping rulebook. But, you know, ultimately, it is interesting if you were trying to play it rules as written. But the rules at least have more opportunities for things. So, like, for example, they've got rules for, like, jumping off of terrain features, for example, and how all that works. So there's a lot more kind of opportunities to navigate three-dimensional spaces than there is necessarily in the 40k rules, which are quite binary.
Yeah, the charging units on terrain, to me, it has quite a circular definition of charging the unit. So I'll read the whole thing out so you can give a gist of it. It says, in some cases, it is not possible to reach an enemy using a charge ability when they are wholly on a terrain feature, e.g. a unit is on the top tower, because the charging unit is unable to end their move midway up the terrain feature, and there is not enough room for the models to be placed at the top. In these cases, the charging unit can end their charge within ½ inch of that terrain feature instead, if this would result in the charging unit ending their move in combat with any enemy units wholly on that terrain feature. So you can end within ½ inch of a terrain feature if you would end up in combat with the unit. But it's like, but the whole reason why they're stipulating rules is that you don't end within combat because you can't reach it. What they mean is you are in combat with the terrain feature which has those models, but the wording's very odd to me.
Yeah, well, again, the intent is clearly if you would otherwise have the movement to get into base-to-base contact, but the terrain is obscuring that outcome, basically you are now allowed to fight them through, you know, that wall, basically, or whatever. So, you know, to me, it's fine. And again, it's a nicer... Again, when you're playing Warhammer 40,000 and people say, oh, I'm an inch away from the wall... And it's like, oh, for God's sake.
No, I know.
Like, you know, yeah, I actually prefer that kind of stuff. But anyway, yes. Long story short is, though, yeah, I agree with Phil. They are obviously leaning into more of a kind of flat thing, but that's kind of how the competitive games are played now. It's just the nature of it, right? And I agree that it's not as cool and hobby-focused, but it is what it is. I suppose the last thing we should talk about with this, because there's a lot of stuff that we could get into, lots of nuanced rules changes and things and fun, but really the most... massive change has been places of power and the ability to give objectives the obscuring keyword. as well as the volume of obscuring terrain that they've used in the battle plans. But the battle plans
also
have lots of obscuring terrain.
The obscuring rule has also changed.
Yes, so those things all in concert. Basically, what they've done is they have increased the amount of obscuring stuff and changed the way the obscuring rule works to make the game a little bit more punishing to shooting units. Because basically, there was a problem in 4th edition AOS at the start, which was that there was quite a few long-range shooting units, and long-range, I would mean like 24, 30-inch range shooting, which, when considering how their version of Overwatch came into effect, led to a lot of instances where people were getting shot quite relentlessly by armies, and it was quite feels bad.
Yeah. Personally, I would say the solution to that would be to make I can't remember the name of it exactly, the Overwatch reaction, which is when you shoot in your opponent's turn, cost more CP if it is a reinforced unit. A reinforced is a double-sized unit, because that was where the egregious problems were. You have a unit that is maximizing its size, able to shoot in both yours and your opponent's turn for minimal costs. And to me, that's where the problem was. But maybe at high level, it was just a general problem everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's called Covering Fire is the name of it. And it's 1 CP and you can shoot at -1 to hit. So it's better than, Overwatch in 40k where you can only hit on 6s. If your weapon would hit on a 3, then you're hitting on a 4, which is, pretty reasonable. And again, it wasn't even dependent upon something moving or whatever. The way it worked is you picked a unit, you spent your CP, and that unit then shot.
Yeah, and you just do that at the end of your opponent's shooting phase.
Correct, yeah. So it's a bit different into how it works. But again, I really like this solution, though, because what it's done is through a number of quite clever changes, they've effectively altered the meta to impact the ability of ranged units to work efficiently. I misunderstood it at first. I asserted that the half range stipulation to obscuring affected the thing shooting at you. So if I was in obscuring terrain, I was under the impression that by being in that obscuring terrain, my opponent, when trying to target me, would have their range of their weapon halved. So if they were range 12, they'd become range 6. That is not true. If I'm on that obscuring terrain and I'm not within combat range of the firing unit, I'm just completely invisible. Yeah. So if I'm basically on a piece of obscuring terrain, I'm invisible. And that's how that works. However, if I'm trying to shoot out of that terrain feature, so if I'm in it and shooting outwards, then my range is halved. So essentially, if I'm basically trying to be cheeky and putting a really powerful shooting unit on obscuring terrain, I then cannot fire out of it unless the thing that I'm firing at is range halved from me.
Yeah. Shout out to Richie, who pointed that out to us moments before we were talking about to record. Also, he noticed that the old obscuring rule was if you were behind an obscuring piece of terrain, you can't be targeted unless you got the fly keyword, and that's now changed to -1 to hit. So in theory, it's worse, you could argue, if you're just behind terrain, but it's way better if you're in the terrain piece. Noting this has no effect on my army whatsoever because I have fly. My whole army has fly, so I'm not gaining any of these benefits. However, the crossbow guys... the crossbows, the Craven Throne Guard, I want to say they're called, the guys with the crossbows, they specifically have a rule that A, shoots out of line of sight, so they ignore obscuring, or actually which technically doesn't override this new rule, but also they ignore modifiers to hit, so the -1 to hit they would ignore. But the rule that stipulates that they have to be within combat range to shoot in, I guess now actually affects them, whereas before, if you just couldn't be seen because you were in or behind obscuring, they ignored that. So Yeah, that's a bit of a hit to them.
Yeah, the -1 to hit stipulation isn't something I'm seeing here. Sorry, I just want to clarify that point when you said there's -1. I'm seeing that a unit is only visible if they're within combat range.
It's cover, but the cover is also on everything. So it's not technically obscuring, it's the cover rule. Sorry, that is...
I understand what you're saying. Sorry, yeah, that's clear.
It's not the obscuring rule, but literally everything has both cover and... Actually, no, so obstacles have cover, but not obscuring, but all the other obscuring pieces also have cover.
That makes sense. So fine. So if you're behind a piece of obscuring terrain, then you are -1 to be hit. But if if every model in your unit is within an inch of that obscuring terrain, you are obscured. And then obviously if you're within the terrain as well, you're also obscured, which means that you can't be targeted unless you're within combat range. And if you're firing out of it, your range is half. So it's interesting how that works. And then, there are places of power now, and places of power before basically used to either boost your magical ability. So if you were already a wizard, you would get like +1 to your casting rolls if you successfully activate a place of power. And if you weren't a wizard, you could essentially unbind spells as if you were, if you activated a place of power. You couldn't cast, but you could unbind. Now what they've done, in addition to all of that, is you can pick a terrain feature, not a terrain feature, an objective within 12 inches of the person activating the place of power, which is an important stipulation. So essentially, to activate the place of power, you have to be within 3 inches of the place of power. You do not have to be wholly within. You just have to basically be on the 3-inch line. And then you basically pick an objective marker within 12 inches. Again, not wholly within, just within 12 inches of the person who's activated the place of power. So if you're on a weird, long, oval base, you can obviously stretch this out a little bit. But basically, then you pick that objective, and that objective gains the obscuring keyword. And effectively the way that works is every model in your unit has to be on the control area of the objective in order to be obscured. There was some debate whether the center of the objective marker, i.e. the marker itself, counted as the control area, because the control area is denoted within the diagram.
It's two separate things. Yeah.
But it's clear that the intent is it's,
both. I mean, I'm sure that will be FAQ'd. So that's an interesting one. So you can now make objectives obscuring as well.
Which is massive, right? And it, again, creates a lot of interesting variables, right? Because, again, knowing what you know in terms of how it works, you could use it as a means of, with the right setups, of punishing your opponent's ranged options. Because, say, for example, your opponent's not choosing to turn their home objective into an obscuring piece because they're wanting to be able to shoot out with no penalty. You could just come along and be, it's obscuring now. And it's like, well, for God's sakes. But more likely than not, you're going to turn your own objectives into obscuring objectives to be able to hide from shooting units. That's more likely what's going to be happening on the regular. But it's interesting in terms of the way it works, and it does make a massive change to the way that ranged combat works in the game, which is an important change in my opinion. So interestingly, remember I was like, crossbows are affected by the obscuring, but actually they can be in an obscuring. They're obviously still getting shot at, but also their range isn't halved either because they've got fly keywords. So they ignore that stipulation. So they override it. So they can override it, but they're not gaining any benefit from being in there anyway. Fair.
Yeah, and they don't even get the -1 to be hit for cover because they've also got the fly keyword in there. It's worth pointing out that the activating place of power has an extra ability, which you basically roll a dice, and on a 1, each friendly and enemy unit within 6 inches takes a mortal wound, but on a 3+, you heal 2, so you can heal 2 points of damage to friendly and enemy units held within 6 inches of the target. And then lastly, the main change for the wizard one is it used to be you could get +1 to your cast and deny for wizards, and if it wasn't a wizard, it got wizard 1 for the casting purposes. For the banishment purposes. Now you don't get the +1 to hit, +1 for casting for wizards. It only benefits non-wizard minis. So there's no easy way for an army to get sort of a universal +1 to cast.
Well, there you go. I think, it's a really significant change that creates a lot of really interesting gameplay opportunities. It's, again, a credit to the AOS team in the way that they kind of come up with creative solutions to solving problems. I genuinely think that there's a lot of really fun stuff here to unpack. It's not immediately obvious how big of a impact this particular rule set is going to impact the game overall, because it's too early to say. I think the thing that's kind of interesting about the chapter approved mission deck is, again, because it's iterative, because it's basically refined version of what they already had, plus some other modes that people will play but won't necessarily impact the competitive game. It's quite easy to understand what that means for 40k. It's like, cool, it's what it was before done better, and that's great. This is still very much kind of, being figured out, and it's going to take time, and there's going to be some FAQs, erratas, and updates that, finesse it as it goes forward. So I think we're about 2 to 3 months away from feeling the full effect of this, and also seeing what Games Workshop do to try and address any potential problems or figure out, the balance. But overall, I think, both are really shining examples of a Games Workshop studio team moving in a really good, positive direction. I think the GHP's got lots of fun, creative ideas in it. I'm really loving all of the kind of changes. We didn't talk about it, but it's worth highlighting that the Scourge of Garan actual kind of seasonal updates, where they've added loads of new battles. The scrolls, war scrolls. So that was the word I couldn't find this whole time. It's super cool, and the rules, that's amazing. That's super fun.
Yeah, so I was going to mention it, but you've already done it. But yeah, every army gets 2 alternative war scrolls. Well,
not everyone. Some only got one.
Yeah, some got 1. If it was a big monster, it was tended to be 1, but otherwise it was 2. Plus, they also got, I think, 2 sort of detachments, your army faction, sort of sub-faction abilities, plus a handful, I think 3, it did vary, of your sort of artifacts or heroic traits, which is like your sort of enhancements equivalent in 40k. So you got a bunch of free updates for your army. It's the equivalent of the Grotmus detachments coming out in line with your 40k deck. So it's not just missions that have changed. Everyone's got these sort of fun new ways of playing their armies as well, that gives life to maybe units that weren't that popular. So I think everyone's sort of reevaluating their army, going, oh, what can I do now? And also looking at it in the context of the battle tactics and the missions themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think the way that it's changed is really quite remarkable, and I think there's going to be some really fun stuff that we get to kind of unearth and discover, but it has created a lot of creative opportunities. Now, they've definitely given us some very strong Scourge of Garan units that have almost become auto-include, so like Rotagus for the Magakin has kind of just become we have to take him now because he's just undeniable. For Skaven players, a lot of us are looking at the Screeching Bell with a newfound enthusiasm, because it has kind of become like an auto-include for the Skaven army. It's not necessarily where I'm leaning with them right now, but I do genuinely see why and how people consider that very strong, because it evidently is. So yeah, it's been really interesting. Black Coach as well, obviously for
that seems like it's got a blow up.
Yeah, so it's been really cool. I think overall, yeah, like I was already saying, both of these feel really great. It's really cool. I'm super pumped to be playing more Warhammer 40,000. I'm genuinely really up for doing more 1,000-point games. I think that's going to be super fun and create a different kind of interesting kind of creative twist on things. But I think this chapter approved deck is great. I'm really disappointed that they didn't make enough of them to satisfy customer demand, but that is what it is. That's Games Workshop at this point. Hopefully they address that going forwards, but it's a new edition in a little under 11 months, so it is what it is on that front. But yeah, the General's Handbook's also really good. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm really happy with both of them. I think the GHB's definitely got me a lot more upended in the sense that I'm having to kind of explore ideas more creatively and come up with newer ways of approaching the challenge and the play style. This has really remarkably changed things for me anyway, in terms of how I'm playing the game and what I'm doing. But that's not to suggest that I don't think Chapter Approved is also really good. I think this is just a win-win. It's a great time to be playing either system. These are both really, really, really strong seasonal updates that I think really demonstrate a real exciting time for Games Workshop rules design. And I'm, again, off the strength of these two things, I'm genuinely super excited to see what comes around the corner for 11th edition Warhammer 40,000, because if this is any indication of where they're going, I feel like we could be in a really strong place, which I think is super cool. But in summary, love them both, really excited to play both, but most enthralled by the GHB at the moment and what that represents for the game of AOS, because I think the mission structure and everything they've done with this is super interesting. And the way that they've attempted to balance things is super interesting. So yeah, I'm genuinely really liking the GHB, but Chapter Approved is cool as well. So that's my final thoughts on these things. Phil, what about you, mate?
No, I think you're pretty spot on. I think out of the two, obviously I don't have the Chapter Approved, but I feel like General's Handbook's got more of a premium feel to it because it isn't just cards. It's, objective markers. It's a book. It's cards. It's all in a little package, which is lots of little things. It's a sort of like, it's a gaming aid. So that feels more like a sort of prestige product rather than just a deck of cards. And as you say, the Chapter Approved is more of a finesse from the system, whereas this is like a refresh of how you're playing, which is obviously, I think, a touch more exciting. Because the the Chapter Approved isn't making me go, oh yeah, I can now suddenly play an army in a wildly different way. But it has got elements, like the twists where you're like, oh cool, maybe taking this hero would be interesting if I randomly got this twist, for example. So I think the one criticism I could give to the General's Handbook is it doesn't really feel like it's got anything for maybe casual play or more narrative play. Obviously, you've got the Path to Glory system, which is their version of Crusade, and there's nothing to do with that. But then, in my mind, to me, AOS just feels like a much more competitive game from the off. Whereas 40k has always had a history of casual gaming and narrative gaming, I don't really feel like AOS has had that, other than maybe the very first few months potentially of the first edition, when it was much more of a port over of elements of fantasy, and it was you had if you've got a beard you can do these dice rolls.
Yeah, that was a dark time, I would say, that particular start of AOS. Was pretty rough. I
mean, it would almost be hilarious to go back and actually play it and see what it was like, because it was obviously accused of a very Beers and Pretzel game, whereas it feels like AOS isn't really that now. So it's like, are these missions narrative and casual enough to both straddle the worlds of competitive play and casual gaming, or are they just one and the same? And it sort of feels like that is what AOS is, whereas 40k feels like it's got these distinct funnels for different types of play. So maybe AOS can kind of get away with it a bit more by not having that thing, or maybe it's something that they do once the game develops. This is only the second one, whereas 40k is on its technically third one of the edition, so maybe next year we get something for the casual people. But to me, I think maybe AOS is both one and the same, so I don't know. It feels like criticism for criticism's sake, but they both feel very good. They're both very exciting. I'm keen to play both, basically.
There you go. Mate, no, I think that's a perfect appraisal of the whole thing, and hopefully you, dear listener, enjoyed coming on that ride with us. We're going to move on now to a 5-star review to take you home. This one comes via Apple Podcasts of Great Britain, a lovely individual called Stig. So I'm going to do the transitional noise and go into that. But thanks very much for listening to that, and please stick around for the 5-star review. And yeah, tune in again next time when we'll be talking about something else. Transitional noise. All right, yeah, so we got a 5-star review. Again, thank you very much to everyone out there who's ever taken it upon themselves to leave us a 5-star review. It means the world to us, and we encourage you to do so because we're going to, always continue to call you out here at the end of the podcast. This one in particular comes from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain, but you can obviously leave us a 5-star review anywhere. There is Apple Podcasts available in all sorts of locations, so we highly encourage you to do so. You can also leave us comments on Spotify, and you can give us 5-star ratings there, but the two things don't kind of coalesce. So we haven't found out a meaningful or thought of a meaningful way to kind of bring that to life. Although I have seen some lovely people say 5-star review on Spotify in the comment section, and we thank you for that. Maybe we need to do a better job of acknowledging those individuals, but ultimately it's a whole swirling world of madness. But typically we're looking at the Apple Podcasts 5-star reviews, as well as also our Facebook page. Audible is a good option as well. But this one has come to us via Stig, and Stig is based, we can assume, in Great Britain, because it's Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. This is, by the way, a new way of trying out this format, and I haven't really worked out the back and forth pattern with Phil at this point, because now it just seems that I'm going to continuously talk as I read this review. But I don't know, Phil, can you come up with a way of interjecting at this point that makes sense?
No, not really. Just you crack on. I'll just be a silent listener and talk at the end.
Well, I tell you what, mate, what it should probably be is you should probably do the spiel about, come on, all you lot, give us a 5-star review.
Oh, governor, give us some pennies so I can eat today.
Oh, please, my friend. Oh, come on,
little Timmy's starving. Oh.
There you go. We'll work it in there. Here you go. So the next time around, you can do the begging bit, and I'll just I'll read it out. There we go. We've worked it out. Also, like and subscribe. Anyway, goes down lovely with a cup of tea. ... I'm pretty confident we've never done this one before, Phil, but it reads like one that we may have done before.
It sounds fresh. Sounds fresh. The tea thing I would have remembered, I'm sure.
You would have remembered. There you go. Goes down lovely with a cup of tea. ... Dan and Phil are rarely... Oh, no. Dyslexia. Dan and Phil are really nice blokes, and this comes across in their conversations. So many often feel like they would be chatting about this kind of stuff, whether we were here to listen to them or not. The topics are varied and interesting, and often the best ones are not necessarily linked to the latest releases, but more fun topics to chat about. The recent, and this was given to us in November of last year, Phil, the recent top 5 codexes made me look up so many old books on eBay that I would never have thought about before listening. Thanks for making the shows, guys, and I hope you choose to keep doing it for many more years to come. Thanks, Stig. Apologies, Stig, I did a terrible job of reading out your statement there, but the sentiment is felt and understood, and again, is kind of now personified in how we're approaching the show. We have mixed it up a lot more. Hopefully that's starting to come through with what we're doing. We're only 2 episodes into this new experimentary world, but hopefully you've enjoyed it thus far. And yeah, really appreciate the support and the fact that you gave us this 5-star review. But to elaborate on that more is, of course, dear old Phil.
Well, thank you, Stig. I appreciate your kind words. Glad that you enjoyed that episode where we talked about old codexes. I'm sure we'll do something similar soon. In the meantime, here is a top eBay tip. Look up The Tragedy of Macbeth, which I believe was a campaign supplement for Warhammer Fantasy, 1st and 2nd edition, I want to say. Because I stumbled across it today, and all the artwork is beautiful. Whether the actual content is something else I do not know. I believe Jordan Sorcery has also done a episode talking about Macbeth, because that is a classic Games Workshop name. Anyway, that's your top tip, Stig. Glad you enjoyed the show. Keep up the good work.
Why is it an eBay tip specifically? You just tell him to go on eBay and buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could look it up, obviously, just on like a Wikipedia, but there's some to buy if you would like to purchase one.
There you go. We expect that you do, Stig, although obviously we're not compelling you to do so. Spend your money however you see fit. But thanks for the review. Thanks for listening, everybody. That was episode 207 of Lookout Sir. We hope you really enjoyed it. We certainly did. And we look forward to coming back to you next time, which should probably be next week, but who knows? Right now, it's a bit of a variable. But yeah, should be back next time with something else. We don't know what it is yet, but we will do soon, as will you. But until then, goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.